who are secretaries at buildings because they are frontline of security, but they're also a frontline of they being the point of contact for any engagement that's thank you for there. And thank you to Will and Aaron and the business office for doing the algorithm and actuarial changes for our teachers who came in with more than secondary school experience. Correct. Level. A lot of people in Will individual level in fuels for thank you.
I'm sure this will come up, but thank you, Michelle, for the amazing event you put on. Was that just last week? I was able to attend the keynote speech. It was amazing. The kids seemed engrossed and quiet and tearing up and being inspired. It was really awesome. Yeah.
Any other comments? Okay, I'll make a quick statement. Jody stole a little bit of the thunder with kind of the ICE and immigration comments. Obviously, a lot of changes happening, or it seems to be happening, and very fast at the federal level. I think there's been some comments through the community, city, different things like that in regards to kind of ICE and immigration stuff in a general sense. But so appreciate that they came out and had those conversations. As Jody said, appreciate kind of what we've done internally to kind of prepare our staff and make sure we have everybody have as much information as possible. So kudos and just following on Jody sitting there. But the other side of the chaos, quote unquote, is the funding stuff. And one day we're on and the next day we may not be, and then it's rescinded and everything else. So just as a general statement for the community to understand is we're going to try to continue to maintain stability and common sense and not feed into the drama and the chaos until it actually starts to be real and we know what it is, because there's a lot of moving parts and things that are being said and talked about, but then it really doesn't turn into anything. So yeah, we're going to just continue to stay grounded, if you will, for lack of a better word, until we actually know what they say is changing is actually going to happen and impact us. So a lot of fast moving parts, a lot of things seem to have quiet down the last few days, but so David, kudos to you and your team for kind of staying on top of that and making sure we just even keel that we're going to wait and see before we set the world on fire if we get told one thing and it doesn't ever materialize. Okay, moving into written messages to the board. We had a few of them in there for a variety of things. And we'll jump into public comment. So remember, try to limit your comments to 3 minutes. I don't know if they have a microphone ready for them so folks in YouTube world can hear them. But Amy Golden. You can sit, you can stand, you can do whatever, but
Whatever is comfortable.
Have at it.
As a result, there are two teams, tier 1 fifth grade team, 3 fourth, third grade teams, and 2 teams. The good team is to go to so I know funding, there's a lot of unknown, but I also appreciate everything that we've already done in the past. Middle school and things like that. I know we've also had conversations about extracurriculars. So right now, all these teams are on my own. So I'm thinking about it sustainable, but it feels to me, given these numbers, in the area. A lot of kids that are on teams this year are a great opportunity to, there's an amazing number of groups of participants, even with less, if you're doing it's just maybe another option for something, and I know probably like a long-term discussion for you, but I just wanted to give you an update with the board members of the interest that is there in different those workforce dimensions, careers, and things like that. So I appreciate all that you do and all that you continue to work to add for students.
Thank you.
You want to switch that out?
Okay, we'll shift again and pass microphones around. Sarah Green.
Oh.
New microphone.
New
microphone.
All right.
Can you
Awesome.
swap it out batteries?
All right. Hey, y'all. Thank you. Thank you for having the chance just to talk. And also many thanks to you because there's been a lot that's been happening around immigration and the school board and the schools have been looking at how to tackle that. And it's messy, like you said. It seems like suddenly urgent or suddenly not. And so I'm a community member. I'm also kind of a founding member with a few Latinas of Latinos Unidos, which is not an official organization in town, but just with the hopes of gathering Spanish speakers for a chance to connect, and which has at this point stopped because no one gathering is not an easy thing right now. So so I'm just here just to kind of bring a little more education around what I've seen happening in the community, and I'm just a small piece. I know some of you, and in the schools you're seeing other things as well. So and just a couple of asks, which may or may not be realistic. I understand. So. But a couple of the things that I know there have been a number of families who have stopped attending school or have attended off and on. And one of them said that it's not because they don't feel safe at school. They feel good at school. It's getting to school because they have to walk a long way to catch the bus. And they're afraid during that walk that they might be recognized. So many families are closing their curtains, keeping their doors shut, and staying home. And even not going to Walmart or not going, they're seeking help with shopping and that kind of thing. So just speaking to that reality that sometimes it's not even the obvious things that are keeping families from school. So, and I know transportation is quite an art in itself. So we're trying to create a community response right now that helps if that's an issue. So if you hear of families or anyone who can't come because of that kind of issue, we're like volunteers who can help drive or whatever to keep kids in school. One thing, and I might have missed it, so forgive me if I had, one of the asks is would the school board or be willing to put out a letter to families stating this is our stance. And I know in general, it's hard to be, in this case, it's hard to be proactive. It's easier to be kind of like reactive because we don't know what's coming down. But wondering if it's possible to put out a letter stating families, we want you here, no matter your status, we're working for safety. There's a lot of mistrust of law enforcement, of course, and I know legally our sheriff and the police have put out memos stating that they can't work with ICE in Colorado. And we also know that there's another report that just happened trying to arrest someone who came across the border. And so there's not a lot of trust in what that means. So just knowing, and I'm not to insult law enforcement, not to do anything like that, but just to also put out that reality that there's just not much confidence in systems right now. So schools, there still seems to be confidence in, and teachers and all the hard work that's been put into them. So just want to say that. Sorry. So that was just one of the asks. Is there a way to put out a statement to families saying this is where we are? I know BV Schools put out one on the 30th of January. So just something to look up or look at. Looking at transportation. And then the other piece, I was talking to a couple youth in the high school who come from different parts and stated that since the election, they feel like they've experienced a different level of bullying within the school, which I know is a hot topic all the time. But I think there's just there seems to be a little more freedom to talk badly about them or call them immigrants, and that ICE is coming for you, and that your family's from another place. And so just awareness of how we as schools create culture of like not accepting that everyone is welcome and wanted in the schools, which is something, again, you all do amazingly well. So I just want to speak that that's a hard thing to address, but I am hearing that from our youth who are immigrants, that they're feeling like getting a lot more comments and a little less welcome at the school. Sorry, I know 3 minutes is up, but there's a number of things that have been put out about the rights of schools, and those are probably things already that I'm sure you've looked into. But if you ever want to talk about them, we've been kind of researching and looking at what are the options and rights. So happy to talk about that further if needed. There's also what's known as the Colorado Rapid Response Network, CORRN, and that is just a place you can report ICE raids. So in the moment, if like ICE shows up, it's a great thing to report because they can send people out to help. They have legal support. So that's just awareness if that's necessary. I think I just want to say how, again, important our immigrants are in our community. And for so much of how we operate, who we are, bringing diversity, understanding, and am very much in the belief that anything we can do to create safety in that makes us a better community. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. We're moving into the next piece. It looks like we need to approve the agenda with the following changes. Add item 5H to action items, approve 0.5 FTE math teacher for HEA, and then remove items 5B and C. First reading policy IC-ICA, school year, school calendar, instruction time, approved school calendar 25, 26, 26, 27. Looking for a motion to approve agenda with those changes.
So,
Jody?
yep.
Second, perfect. Okay, David, do you want to mention anything in comments about the removing of the calendar piece? Just so I know that.
No, any of the operational things around positions are so we can post as fast as possible and gain to try and get a workforce. So that's why that's pushed up a few items like that. They come with admin and everybody's full support, having reviewed it. And the new calendar, I did send something out earlier just to say there really isn't a recommendation of change. You already have an approved calendar for next year. I think you need to look at your overall academic programming and see if you can make a calendar at that time that would match and maybe improve it. But I know that we were trying to figure out how to create a Thanksgiving break was a little more extended, but it has unintended consequences that need to be thought through better.
Any other questions, comments on that? Ready for vote?
All right, Dr. Breckenridge-Pettit.
Aye.
Mr. Hobbs.
Aye.
Mrs. Lundberg.
Aye.
Mrs. Pascal.
Aye.
Ms. Schickman. Aye. And Mr. Smith.
All right. Okay, moving into reports. We do not have a guest report, but we do have a detailed report from Michelle Staub in the middle school. So I'm sure we're going to be doing
Wherever
some
you're
tech
comfortable.
things and getting you a mic and letting you two play and see your screen,
I was
hopefully.
gonna say, Michelle, if you want to slide a chair over to the mic, and that way you don't have to. Yep. And then you can still sit.
I could slide the mic there. So,
Getting cozy.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm Michelle Song. I'm the principal at Salida Middle School. Just going to give you a brief overview of what's going on and highlight some things that we're really proud of this year. All right, so who we are. This year we have 329 students. That's about 15 up from last year. I don't know how to make that bottom page. You have to see all these really cute pictures. Lucy's up there, Jess. You didn't even notice her. We have 5th through 8th grade. math, science, social studies, and language arts are our grade level classes. Our specials are art, music, PE, health, technology, and then this year we are really grateful to have a full-time Spanish teacher. In the office, it's myself, our dean, our counselor, and our school psychologist that's funded through our school health professional grant. We have 4 special educators with, actually that's a typo. Well, currently we have 4 para educators, but we're funded for 5. We had one leave in the middle of the year. And some big changes that we're really proud of are having enrichment and crew every single day. So these are our numbers, how they are broken down. You can see across the board, our 8th grade is always a little bit bigger than the other grades as we have some transfers from Montessori or Crest that want to be at our school before they move on to the high school. Our 5th grade has been bigger the last couple years than it has typically been, and we expect a pretty big 5th grade class next year with some big needs. And I've reported out how we perform on CMAS. We are really proud of all of those things, but one of our goals this year was growth and academic growth. So that is something we've been working on. I know that you guys wanted an update on what full-time Spanish is looking like. That is Miss Hermosillo. She is wonderful. We're really happy to have her. 50 6th grade students signed up for Spanish this fall. We've never, ever been able to offer it to 6th grade in the past. So that is a huge achievement. That is more than half of the class that wants to learn Spanish. Flexibility with the full-time teacher means more students can take Spanish, and it allows more students to choose band and choir too, because it's able to create more balance in our semester schedule. One really cool thing we were able to offer is heritage Spanish. So in the past, our native Spanish speakers were not getting Spanish credit going into high school because Spanish 1 was way too low level for them, which was a bit of an equity issue because many of them were fluent. So now we are able to offer a heritage Spanish class for native heritage Spanish speakers, which is very similar to a lot of other school districts in the state, and allows them to earn credit going into high school. And we are working on a placement test so we know where our native Spanish speakers can go into at the high school. 170 students, more than half of our school, have been enrolled in Spanish this year. And also having her on staff just allows for more relationships, different enrichment, and she's really a team player, a big advocate of our immigrant students in our Spanish-speaking community, and helps a lot with all of that. Did you guys have any questions about Spanish or anything? I know that was a big ask last year. Just stop me at any time. So these are our school-wide priorities. You'll note I got a professional photographer this year to do some school beautification. So our pictures are very cool in this presentation, but I connected them to joy, connection, and growth. And so the first priority was joy, and that was really giving voice and choice to our students and working on a real and true enrichment program. We had enrichment, but it was mostly intervention, where many of our students were having math or ELA like 3 times a day sometimes. And as you know, adolescence isn't really like, I want to go to school to take 3 math classes. It's like, I want to go to middle school to be with my friends. I want to feel connected to others, and I want to have fun. So it was really, how can we increase the joy that bring our kids into the building? So we wanted to increase connection to adults, increase culture, and more interest and passion in the afternoon or daytime enrichment classes. So some highlights of that is student voice and choice. All of our students got to choose their enrichments, and they got 4 throughout the year. And our teachers got to choose something that they wanted to teach that they were passionate about and learning in a different context. And then the classes are combined 5th and 6th and 7th and 8th grade. So it was different relationships with different teachers in the building, and there's a variety and changing at the quarter. These are just some examples of some of our enrichment classes, and I'll show you what the course catalog looks like for next year. We had an awesome photography class. We also have different band classes. You can see robotics. The mural class and the roller coaster class are both taught by math teachers. So it wasn't just like learning how to make a roller coaster, but it was learning the equations as to why the roller coasters work, or the math. It was geometric art. So this particular one was representing pi in the mural, which I couldn't even understand, but it was incredible. So this is what our students are already choosing. Our incredible counselor and dean are actually at an Infinite Campus conference right now. And so in order to go to the conference, they had to have our master schedule completed for next year. So we're done with that. And they're learning at this conference how our kids can choose in Infinite Campus, and it turns into their schedule. So we're already ready for everything for last year. But our kids got this presentation and they get to choose like sports or poker and blackjack. I know, but it's taught by a math teacher, so they're gonna learn. Um, yeah, we might have a guest speaker. Nature walking and journaling, creative writing, calisthenics, books and connected to movies, games, outdoor education in national parks, DIY. Like these are just a few of the selections for 7th and 8th. In 5th and 6th, we'll have yoga, dance, and fitness, board games, money. This one I'm really interested in, teaching our 5th and 6th graders like all about money and how to create budgets and how to understand credit cards. Holy cow, I should have gotten that in 5th and 6th grade. Like a variety pack of STEM. Mr. Lamont's teaching speech and debate. The roller coasters was super popular. Miss Godina is teaching basketball skills, which is obviously really popular as well, a STEM class. So this is just a variety of what we're able to offer, and we're using some of our school health professional grants. So we brought a hydroponic garden for a gardening class. We bought podcasting materials for a podcasting class, a broadcasting class. So we're able to really bring some innovative stuff to our kids. So a couple changes is it wasn't graded, and so our teachers asked to at least move it to pass fail, to just a little more buy-in for that adolescent brain. And then on Mondays we're going to do a whatever I need day. So they will have a catch-up day with their teachers on Mondays to do whatever they need, and then the enrichments will run Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And then these are just a couple ways we were covered in the local media for our enrichment. Our second priority was connection, and that is like increased connection to community, to teachers, to other teachers, and teachers to their homeroom students, and growing our leadership. And so one of our big goals was to put on this conference. So last week we had a full student conference for our entire student body. It was an entire day, and it ran just like a conference that we would go to, where we had over 22 presentations from local people. We really wanted to steer clear, because they're 10 to 14, from like, what do you want to do when you grow up, to just what is engaging to you, what could spark some curiosity, what could spark some interest, and what are people in our community doing that might excite you. And it was super duper popular. This is just some of our speakers. You can see we had a professional dirt bike racer. We had wonderful Christina Smith from Del Mama come in, and there was a line out the door for hers. We're trying to convince her to teach an enrichment next year in our life skills room. We had Lindsay Sutton, a local artist that did a project with the kids on self-portraits. This is Dr. Annie. She brought in a dog. We also have an Avi dog with Monarch Ski Patrol. This is Ian, who Jen came and saw, our keynote speaker. We had kids like in tears. I've never seen 350 middle school kids all quiet and listening to somebody's life story. And it was really about exposure too. It's a very different life than a lot of our kids had, but they were very inspired by his message. And he also did 3 breakout sessions that were highly popular, and the kids are asking for him to come back. We had Parks and Wildlife do all things bears, and they got to see bear traps, and they brought in archery, and they brought in skulls. We brought Elemental 5 in. for parkour. And this is the guy that owns Badfish that did all things like whitewater and told them all about the building of Scout Hunt. And this is just like, half of what we brought in. So it was incredible. It was one of the more inspirational days I've had in my career. And the kids are already begging for it to come back. And this was fully funded through our school health professional grant, which is really important to us. And then not lastly, but our third goal was growth, and that is academic growth for our kids, and then restorative practices, and as well as our book study around the anxious generation. We had great participation in that book study, so professional growth for our teachers. We have incredible participation in our vertical teams, as well as our grade level teams. So our PD this year has been vertical teams and standards alignment with Cindy Ward. We're really, although we don't want to focus everything on CMAS, we do want to focus on making sure that all of our kids grow. So making sure that what we're teaching is aligned to the Colorado State standards. She just did a backwards planning and understanding professional development with our staff, which was wonderful. And so we also did the Anxious Generation book study that 90% of our students or teachers participated in. And now we're doing, as a result of that, Let Grow, which has been really well received by our students and our parents. And that's really advocating for our kids to have more independence, which is, the pendulum has swung from like coddling our kids and doing everything for them. So they have projects where they might need to walk to the grocery store and get something for the family. We just had a student potluck where every student was supposed to cook something on their own under supervision of their teachers and come in, and that was really cool. So really just not only tackling the phones, which is the big problem, but the opposite side of the phones is giving our kids more interest in the world and life and each other, and more independence. We've done some inclusion work with Jamie Morgan, and one of our big highlights is our math team really advocated for more math professional development. So we were able to get funds from the district to bring in really great professional development around developing mathematical thinking. And those are the priorities for the remainder of the year for our vertical teams. So for next year's priorities, we only have one more year of the school health professional grant. So I'm really just advocating for perhaps looking into continuing that, since it does fund our school psychologists, and we've been able to do all of these amazing things with the funding. We're going to continue with very similar priorities and instructional focuses, because this has just been year one. So I'd hate to shift everything and then have everything fall apart. As you guys know, with our wish list, we really would love to have that ADA playground and access to the turf. Our sped room is really important to us. We'll have 2 grade levels next year that about 30% of our students will be on IEPs in both the 5th grade and the 7th grade. And so we need space, and we need room, and we need great teachers to feel like they have that space in our room. And we're seeing more and more students with more significant needs and on the autism spectrum, so that sped room redesign is a top priority. And then we want to continue with the school beautification. As of right now, I only have one open position, and that is our second PE position, which is health and fitness. I don't know of anything else. I think we might have one possible retirement, but that's pretty cool to only have one right now. All right. Questions, comments, or feedback?
On the Spanish, so if they start in 6th grade and take it 6th, 7th, and 8th, what kind of trajectory, what track are they on when they get to the high school?
That's a great question. So we are, what we've decided is that 6th grade is going to be language and culture exploration for next year, because we couldn't figure out how to start a Spanish 2 at the middle school. Eventually that would be awesome if we could start them in 5th grade, do a Spanish 1 and then a Spanish 2. But so 6th grade is going to turn into language and culture exploration, and a prerequisite for 7th and 8th, which will give them the Spanish 1 fulfillment, and they can move into Spanish 2 when they go to the high school. Because
So
we
the
were getting a little bit of a
combination of seventh
bottleneck
and
at
eighth.
starting it in the 6th grade, yes. But with the placement test, we could have a kid that places in Spanish 4 if we could get there, which would be really cool.
Yeah.
And that's not just native Spanish speakers. We have plenty of kids that have lived in Mexico that are actually probably have more like reading and writing skills that could get them to test high on the placement test.
And then the CMAS scores, is that, I feel like those are the same numbers we've been looking at for a while, is that right?
Yeah.
So those were the fall, when they came into the grade they're in now?
Yes. And our achievement scores are fine. We're
Are these
above
last
in-
spring?
yes, last spring. So
The CMAS just won.
this time April last year.
Okay, yeah.
So we're about to take it again.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, no minds, April. We
And
won't see
when
his
do we
results
get
until
them?
August
Until
or September.
August, yeah. And I just, again, I think I said this last time, we looked at them, like I don't want to be all wrapped up in test scores because I don't always think it's a great measure, but some of the numbers make me pretty uncomfortable
I couldn't
as
agree
a
more.
school board member, and,
And
I
it
would
was
assume
actually-
a community member.
It was kind of what I needed because I'm used to coming from schools that were constantly looking at CMAS scores because we were always under pressure in DPS. So it was a little bit of, I don't want to look at CMAS scores, and it's part of the reason why I love my job now is that I'm not constantly thinking about CMAS.
Yeah.
But it was that little bit of inspiration for our staff of like, it doesn't matter how they perform, but kids should grow no matter what. It's not about the test, but we are here for instruction and for kids growing. And that's the part that got to me last year, or at the beginning of this year. It's kind of a lag measure. It's a bit difficult.
Such a lag.
So with that being said, Michelle, what kind of things are discussed if you're talking with your staff, or are things being done differently, or you just?
Yeah, I think a lot of our professional development of full school alignment to the standards in ELA, working with science and social studies on some what we call like power standards of like what are something that aligns between all of our departments that we can really focus on with our students collaboratively. I think just by focusing on it, which I hadn't done a ton of in my first 2 years, I think we're going to see a drastic difference. Hopefully, we'll see. And honestly, our teachers are excited because that's what they're there for. We have really wonderful teachers that are career educators, and so it's fun for them to talk about standards, to talk about backwards planning and design and understanding, and they're inspired by that collaboration with their teams. Yes, so, and I do think the developing mathematical thinking training, I think we'll see the results, and we did that in collaboration with Corey and his staff too. It was K-8, so that could be really building a math program K-8 in a style of teaching. And Corey actually sat in, and I've heard nothing but wonderful things.
That's all.
Yeah, I don't have other questions really, but I was just gonna say the same thing, that I've heard tons of good feedback on the math training from staff, that they all thought that was super helpful. And then just having Anna at the school, like she also loved that seminar conference that you guys did. And then also, like you mentioned, the let go, do the cooking projects, like that was also fun. Like she went and got her ingredients, made her cookies. I wasn't even there. She took them to school. So all of that, just on a personal level, I see a lot of growth and benefit from what we're doing. So
Thank you. And we've gotten awesome feedback from parents. We weren't really sure how it was going to land because, you know, some parents are like, but it's my baby. They can't go to the grocery store. And they're like, yeah, they can go to the grocery store, especially in this community. We're so lucky that we live in a place that it's not scary to walk down the street for most of our kids.
Michelle, I have a couple of questions. Thank you for following up on that Spanish full-time teacher in that building, and then extraordinary participation. And then the secondary question was, what is the enrichment? And you gave great examples. So I am so reassured about making that and putting that position in recurring funds. So thank you very much.
Thank
Um,
you.
When Mondays, whatever I need, teach me, can you just elaborate on what that means?
Sure. So our teachers were feeling like the enrichments were really, really wonderful, but there was no time for something like a study hall, for something like a kid just missed a bunch of time and they can't make up their work, or a kid is really struggling and they might need a little bit of intervention.
Okay, so that's,
And so during that time, they'll report back to their crew teachers, and
go where
then
they need to go.
amongst that, their
Got
team,
it.
they'll decide, that's why we call it whatever I need. And then there's going to be a lot of kids that are caught up to everything. And so they could work on a passion project, or they can read a book, or they can have some time outside. And so we didn't want it to be like, this is study hall for everybody, because it's really whatever I need.
And that's on Mondays?
It's on Mondays. We did it on Mondays because we do goal setting on Monday mornings during crew, so we thought that would be good. Also, they
Yes.
run eligibility on Tuesdays, so a lot of kids are clamoring to get in things on Mondays as well.
Okay, perfect. Now I understand, and it sounds great. What do you mean by turf access?
So we have a student who is in a wheelchair, and she
So
can't
the
move
ADA.
the ADA yet.
Okay,
She
that's-
can't really
that's-
get onto the turf
Totally.
strip in the middle school without
Yeah,
going.
without spending her entire recess
Yes.
or free time getting into the entrance. Yeah, got it. That was what's
And
showing.
sometimes she goes all the way to that entrance and it's like locked or something.
Okay, so just that better ADA accessible ramp. More.
She's
beyond-
an incredible advocate, and she holds us all accountable. And I'm happy
Oh,
for
yeah,
that.
that she does. Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Michelle, I had one or two board members just in the last few days mention something around the laptops and one-to-one. And I know you're kind of recommending a change from one-to-one back to kind of carts, we might say. You want to talk about
Yeah.
that for 30 seconds?
It goes along with how much time our kids are in front of screens. Now that we have a new system that we can see, we can't see what kids are doing, but it can flag. We're seeing that a lot of our kids are using our Chromebooks to get on Netflix or Spotify. And I don't have a problem with those things, but I don't think that that's what our Chromebooks are for, that we purchase our Chromebooks for kids to be on screens all night long. And that goes along with the Let Grow. We want our kids to be outside. We want them to be engaging with each other and their families and not in front of screens. And that is a family decision, but that is not what our Chromebooks are designed for as a school, in my opinion. And also we have tons of damage to our Chromebooks. And right, like at one point in the year, we had 70 damaged Chromebooks. And I feel like our Chromebooks are becoming something like a notebook or something like that, where they're not taken as a priority. They're not taken seriously. It's just like somebody handed this thing to me and I don't really care. And so our staff and our leadership is really advocating for keeping the Chromebooks in the classroom now. Also, I see kids like walking down the hallway, like playing a game on their Chromebook. I don't see the need for a kid to be on a screen all day long. And if we're going to be serious about the phones, then a screen is a screen. And so we are likely moving towards Chromebook carts in the classroom for 5th through 7th, and then maybe giving them in as a rite of passage in 8th grade to get ready for the high school to learn the responsibility with some digital citizenship at 8th grade. Even though it might require us purchasing more Chromebooks up front to have Chromebooks in the classroom, I think the cost savings will be in the damage and the repair.
So all that's kind of on the administrative side. You guys probably won't have to vote on that, but I know it'd be important for many of you guys to hear that.
And I'd
That
love to
change.
hear your thoughts or opinions on
I
that.
mean, I'm glad you brought that up, because I was definitely even hounding David, because we had to have some conversations at our home of like, okay, now we don't do homework in our rooms anymore because turns out we're watching Netflix. And I've always had a policy of no computers, no TVs in the room, right, for that same reason. So I definitely agree. I do not think that middle school kids need to be bringing home their own personal device. So yeah, and then with the damage, I noticed in Jake's report, like he talked a lot about a ton of damaged Chromebooks. So then I asked David about that again. Is that mostly middle school Chromebooks that are going home? And it sounds like yes, it is. So
Shocking.
I would support it. Yeah, I would support that 100%. And definitely, if
I
there was a
appreciate-
budget piece for that, I would advocate for cards in the room and not having the Chromebooks go home.
Thank you. And I forgot that that's also connected to that What I Need Mondays too, because some of our English language arts teachers are like, but they do need to complete like essays at home. And I do think and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we underestimate the number of devices that kids might have at home anyway. So if they need to borrow a parent's computer to complete an essay, and then we'd hope to get a cart in the library that if a kid needed to check one out overnight, then we could do that. And then on Mondays, they could also use that time to follow up on some essays too. But I know when I was in, we did, surveys when I was in Denver Public Schools working like 93% during reduced lunch. We were shocked by how many parents actually had devices. I think kids can get innovative. They can go to libraries. This goes along with the like grow, right? Like they need to learn that we don't need to hand them something all the time. And maybe they'll take more responsibility when they realize that we don't just give them a $350 device all the time.
Do they ever do anything handwritten?
Actually, we're with AI. Most of the first drafts are handwritten now, which is a great way of like. I think AI is a wonderful tool for proofreading and feedback, but our English language arts teachers are moving more towards handwriting for the first draft, so it is like their own thoughts.
Yeah, couldn't support this more. You answered all my questions. It would be great for kids to write based on the level of writing I see from students when they have to write.
Yes,
Amazing.
Do appreciate Josh too. He's kind of been upgrading our filtering system, which is giving us some more of the data to help drive these decisions. So it's not just guesswork, but we're actually seeing better understanding. So I appreciate that little tweaks and changes staff are making right now.
I do have one more question that I did think of. With having an open position, and then with having just gone through health curriculum in high school, something I've also been asking David about is trying to have a more comprehensive health program K-12.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wondered if this is maybe an opportunity to jump the gun a little on that and align health standards with middle school more in line
We've
with.
already gotten involved in it. So
Yeah,
I'll let you talk
we
about it.
were ahead of that before we had the open position.
Okay.
Jessica Benna has been going to. There were some politics that I was not familiar with FYI and the community voting for this specific health curriculum that we have been using. So even if we didn't think it was the best curriculum, Jessica has been working on the backside with the community and with that committee saying we might need to look at something else. I'm not used to that. I'm like, let's just change the curriculum, but she's been doing a great job. And with that, we're moving into looking into 5th through 8th grade health curriculum that can be in alignment with the high school. Also, and I know this is a little controversial, but I'm very moving towards perhaps not dressing out for PE and some big changes perhaps in the middle school because there's just the constant fight of going to the locker room. And I think in today's society, it is a little bit sketchy to send a bunch of kids into a locker room together and ask them to dress out and get graded on that and things like that. But it's a different conversation for a different day.
And being flexible with kids who already wear those clothes to school every day. It seems a little silly to change out of your Adidas sweatpants into your Adidas
I see a lot of
sweatpants.
kids with their shirt on top of a hoodie, and I'm like, well, that's actually less hygiene. Then you're sweating a little bit more, but you're dressed out.
Well, I appreciate
Participating but not wearing the proper clothing.
And most of our kids in Salida are wearing athletic wear too.
Well, thanks for being flexible.
Yeah, especially. And there are now, and we're going to choose the best candidate, but we have an opportunity to have a female and a male candidate, a PE teacher, which I think is important if we are sending kids into locker rooms.
I waited too long and Mandy beat me to that point.
Yeah,
So.
I mean, I think not even just locker rooms, but I think in general, teaching health curriculum, same as having female coaches for female students, having a female and a male health teacher, I think would be a really great strategy.
Yeah, I would echo some of those comments of trying to maybe be cart in front of the horse a little bit with the health curriculum, not to stereotype all the gym teachers and coaches, but this kind of seems to be where the path to go, and getting somebody more along in the health curriculum things that we've been talking about versus your standard coach, so to speak. So, and then, yeah, as a parent and spouse, whatever you want to call me, for what happened last Wednesday was I've heard nothing but good things from everybody. So appreciate those types of creative things to get people in the community involved and kids exposure to different things at young ages.
Thank you. And a lot of those folks have hard jobs and they left and they were like, you guys have the hardest job. Along with the health, I do think, because David told me to mention it, there was a letter to the editor that mentioned that we had fentanyl in the middle school. And I just want to assure you that we have had no cases of any fentanyl in Salida Middle School. So you might read that in the letter to the editor. It was very shocking to me.
Today.
Oh, okay, 'cause I just.
No, I think it was Monday. I think it was yesterday. I don't, but it just, it's about a whole nother thing. And then there's a sentence that said, fentanyl was found at Salida Middle School. And I was like, no, it wasn't.
Just say
I know. So
Just throw it out there.
it was shocking to me. And so just to clear that up, you can always ask. Officer Tucker was just as surprised as I was.
Okay, thank you, Michelle.
I
Appreciate it.
I wish I would have ended on something else. But we can talk about the conference, right? Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments for our various campus leaders, managers while they're with us before we turn it over to district reports? Doing a lot of great things, so. David, Will, Aaron, we'll shift into district reports real quick.
I know Aaron's got some stuff. I do just want to make a couple comments. I know from the community, people have even commented tonight about different things from the federal government changes. I just want to make sure we're really clear. Everyone is welcome in our schools. Nothing's changed. Nothing's going to change. Everyone is welcome. So just want to make sure we say that out loud and there's no confusion on that point. And there's no intent that would change regardless. Second thing, we want to make sure, remind everybody that education is a state responsibility and is part of state law. It's not a federal responsibility in terms of the U.S. Constitution. And so we will continue to follow state law, which still protects and ensures everyone is welcome. Back to the first point. That being said, there is a lot of noise in that stuff. And so community is always welcome to reach out to me and I can sit down and say, here's the current situation. Here's where it's going. We're tracking it as best we can and trying to stay calm as we go through it. And the great part is our district's in a wonderful spot to handle difficult times. We've got great staff and great places, a lot of stability. Financially, we're in a stable place. I know not all of our districts in the region are in the same spot. We are in a great spot to be able to navigate whatever this is. And so we will ride this one out. But our staff is not in a crisis. Buildings aren't in crisis. I want to make sure the community realizes that we're in a good space coming into it. Aaron, I know there's a couple things. You definitely had a mill levy ride thing you'd put in front of the boards. I want to make sure you had a chance to talk about that and anything else.
Yeah, I just have two quick things that are kind of new that were after my report. I put this in front of you. This is kind of a press release looking at having Kim put through different areas. But basically, the way the county tax bill comes in, it looks kind of confusing because there's the mills that we certified at 29.169, and then on the bottom there's the statement that says without state equalization, basically, we would have charged 28.783 mills, and everyone looks at those two numbers and goes, wait a minute, why are you charging more than the state's saying you should charge? But it's not, what that doesn't do is it doesn't actually break down the total program versus what's a mill levy override that was voter approved locally and what was bond. And so trying to just get clarity on that. And it hasn't been widespread. I've answered a few community questions, but I think it might be good to just get something out that basically explains it before we have too many questions. So just would like you to look over it. Would like Kim to maybe send this out in the next couple of days. So if you have thoughts on it that you'd like to send back, please do. But hopefully that explains it and makes it a little bit more clear. It's always complicated when you're talking about mills, so it may just be gibberish in some ways, but at the same time, I think it's important for us to acknowledge there's some questions.
I would recommend this as a guest editorial, guest letter to the editor versus press release. It seems more appropriate in my mind to do that. And access to that column versus the press release.
Makes sense. Yeah, I think just finding the right channels to get it in the community so they understand what's happening, so they're not thinking that we're taking extra money from them when we're not. So that was the first thing. And then the second piece of it is we're still looking at insurance. I know Will put in his board report. We've met with 5 different brokers now to try to do some shopping due to the insurance increase. Just today, we had our renewal meeting with CEBT, and there's good and bad. Overall, our plan is going up 22%. It's because our usage is very high, and the largest part of our usage is local. We live in a rural town, and rural hospitals are more expensive. So we're trying to find some solutions. I actually left the meeting today pretty positive, so I think in the next month you should see some good things. We're meeting with the insurance committee next week. Me and Will sit down and kind of come up with some things that we think we should discuss, and hopefully find some ways where we don't have to see a full 22% increase, but we can still take really good care of our staff. So you'll see a lot of potential change recommendations and strategy. I think the biggest thing, though, from my perspective, is we have to get control of our usage. Otherwise, we're going to see this again next year, and we've seen it for the past 3 years. And so we have to find a strategy that's going to actually solve the usage problem. Not that we don't want people taking care of themselves and getting the health care they deserve, but there might be some ways that we can get creative in how we do it and lower our usage.
So you said a lot of it because local usage, right? So we all know that costs are a lot more expensive at our hospital than going to the Springs. So is this the kind of situation where we can have a conversation with our hospital about costs for employees?
Yeah, we've
For
had
people staying local for an MRI versus traveling, but it doesn't cost $7,000 more?
Yeah, I would. So we have had a meeting. Me, David, Will sat with the hospital both about athletic trainers and about costs, especially local costs. We're going to continue to work on that. We have one of our brokers who's looking at contracting directly with the hospital. I'm not immediately thinking that that's going to be our long-term solution. I just think there's a pretty big gap we've got to try to work through at this point. So, it's a good idea. I'd love to continue that process, and that's the thoughts I'm most comfortable sharing.
Is this something other small districts do with their hospitals that we know of, or does the hospital do this with other groups, or we just kind of?
We would be
Trying to
pioneering a
invent this.
solution with our hospital. We've tried in the past. We've got to the initial conversation, which is an improvement. And so we'll see how far that goes. But at this moment, if we're just looking at cost analysis, it's definitely worth paying our people to go to the front range, which we prefer to keep our business local, but we cannot afford to do so at this time. So we're trying to figure out a way to do that.
And I would kind of echo obviously the cost conversations and knowing some of those components, but also like the usage conversation. And it's like we're almost being too good to employees, and they're just kind of loosey goosey taking advantage of the benefits they provide, and doesn't necessarily affect their finances, but it does ours. So in turn, eventually will affect theirs as we can't continue to pay the premiums. So it's just one of those things where educational or a better package that is still equitable and
Yeah, I might shift the language a little on that. I just think healthcare is really complicated. And unless you have to dig in to really understand the nuances of your benefit package, then you're going to do it in the least restrictive, the pathway. That's going to be normal human behavior. And so we're talking about sociological and psychological triggers. We want our staff to be really good shoppers and consumers. And we need to put them more in the driver's seat. And thus far, we haven't done that with our current products. So we got to rearrange it so it puts more responsibility on them in the decision making. That has a direct response or connection to usage. And so I think that's what Aaron's talking about. Aaron, do you want to add to that at all?
Yeah, I think that's the big piece. I'm looking at solutions that will still take really good care of staff, but also encourage really healthy practices in terms of financially with our benefits. Because, yeah, to your point, Joe, right now with our HRA, $2,000 is the max out of pocket that somebody would see. And so if a procedure costs $5,000 in the front range, or $5,000 here and $2,000 in the front range, they're only going to see $2,000 either way. And yet at the same time, it's going to hit our insurance bill $5,000. And so suddenly our usage is immediately taking that person basically and put them at 100% of their usage rates. And so to your point, it doesn't have an immediate impact on your finances. But when your usage is this high and we go up 22%, you start to look at people who have like the family insurance, and the cost for them at 22% would be about $3,000 increase in their benefits next year over the course of the year. We can't give raises that are going to cover that, and so we have to find ways to get more creative where we can deal with that. So I think you're exactly right. I think it's shifting. It's still offering really good benefits, but it's also providing opportunities and education on how this impacts the entire district on the decisions that you make with your healthcare. And at the same time, our goal is to provide really good benefits. That's what we're doing. And then not to move away from that, but one thing I also forgot is just so you know, because I got the mic for 1 second. This is Caleb. He's here. He just drove down. He's with the Schneider Electric Company. So just wanted you to know that in case we take a break. And I know that's on the consent agenda, but wanted you to know he drove down if you have any questions or thoughts about that. But since it was in consent, I need to do my so.
Does anyone want to ask a question right now? Schneider Electric is the contract we have in front of you. We will be leveraging, replacing, which is required by law. It's already regulated to replace going all to LEDs. That leverage of those dollars into the grant programs will then open up other projects that we hope we can just keep leveraging dollars and grants. And of course, Grantland is also in a little confusion. These are state grants, the majority of what we're looking at. So this should be secure in terms of some expectations should match reality. So it's a pretty open and I think clear thing. There's no major cost to us at all. We'll just get better product and get a chance to raise the result on it. So.
What kind of time frame does it affect? For you to do it all at once, do you piecemeal it? How does that work? Yes. And so then once it got started, how long does it take? Do you?
Yeah, so the design phase is typically 5 months. So
So that's done during the school year, probably. I mean, it have to be.
It could be, sometimes they do that. They can do that stuff on break sometimes. That's what we just gotta wait. They did a
Yeah.
theoretical analysis and know that just our lighting systems is enough to make the money work. So now they're gonna come in and do not theoretical, but actual audit and design. So it could be some projects this summer, but I would guess winter break and then really scoping up for the following year.
And you said gas, electric, and and water. Oh,
whatever we can find, and we'll bring back that laundry list of savings opportunities and present to the district and say, we don't want this water conservation measure. This could be more of a headache for our maintenance, like low work fixtures sometimes. There are savings, but it becomes a larger headache, and savings don't always outweigh Bachelor of Electricity and ultimately in addition to the jobs. So decide what scope.
Any updates from either of you, state house wise, budget, anything? It's not smart there.
Yeah, no, I'm following budget stuff every day between the, one day we have Head Start, next day we can't get Head Start fund, the next day we have Head Start, and then you have the state fund. So there's a lot of things happening right now. I mean, Governor Polis has put out a new budget basically for schools as of January that basically gets rid of the averaging, which we kind of talked about. I'm pretty pro it at this point because when you do the math, a lot of districts that even are losing students are not losing very much money because the funding formula already provides more money. And so, you can look around the district and I can compare some to you. I don't want to bring it up to a public meeting, but ones that I've compared that have lost a lot of students over the past few years, even without going into this averaging, would actually lose very little money. And so they wouldn't be able to add a lot of programming. They wouldn't be able to add a lot of salaries, but they're not losing a bunch of money. So I'm pretty pro that is going to in some way manifest, which is really his way of trying to cut as much money as he can and fund just the students that are currently in the state. So if that's his way to cut, I don't remember the exact number, but to cut that 600 million down to where it's a manageable size. And so I think what you're going to see is some type of compromise where there's instead of a 5-year averaging of students, you're going to see like a 2 to 3 year. Tomorrow, I know David's meeting with Speaker of the House McCluskey for 15 minutes to chat a little bit about what we're trying to, some of the goals of the rural districts and things like that. So we're monitoring it really closely. They haven't come out with a new budget though at this point. I do think that his solution right now is one that I support, even though I think I'm in the minority of rural districts. And to be fair, we'd get a lot more money out of it. So I have a vested interest in it.
I think the other thing just to add is insurance increase is our number one concern, place we want to invest when we're talking to the bargaining team and just trying to draft, as well as looking at teacher salary. Those two are related, trying to figure out how those can best do those. But I think we're going to be able to accomplish all of our goals, building off of a zero student growth, which is not what we predict. We would still predict 15 kids next year, which would be an addition. So I feel pretty confident. Aaron agrees that we can accomplish most of our hopes and get the staff positions you have in front of us tonight. We don't see that's going to stop us from adding to teacher salary as well as tackling some of our insurance needs. We're not going to get everything, but I think we can get a lot of it, and in no way put us at risk. You're in a really good spot.
Do you have any federal grants that are potentially at risk?
The two federal grants that we watch, one is the biggest one is going to be Head Start, which is actually ran by Department of Health and Human Services, not by the Department of Education at the federal level. That's important.
That's a grant.
That is a grant, Head Start, an early Head Start grant. That's about almost $1.6 million. So if that would shift and change, that would change the entire ecosystem of Chaffee County, because it is the Achilles heel of our entire workforce, not just teacher workforce, but all of Main Street. It would, so it's a big deal. Like if they went in, not just in the Department of Education, the federal level, but even just to mess with the flow and put a pause on something in the Department of Human Services, where that's managed, that could have serious impact. We have reserves, so we're in a good spot where we could handle it short term, but obviously not a long term thing. So that's a concern. Title money. There's a couple different sectors of that comes from the federal grant to help districts with the families that are less affluent, to address with learning loss and some of the other needs. So think of our title instruction at the elementary school. We've got 2 teachers there. That's some examples of that. And there's a couple other things. That does come through the federal Department of Education. So that's about $200,000, almost $230,000 this year total. If we include Title IV, I believe it's in that range.
And then, go ahead.
No, is there another one?
The other one's not a grant, but it's definitely dictated by the conversation at the federal level right now, is the free food for all, because the state could not afford the free food for all. And so they really pushed to get as many eligible schools into the CEP program, which is, you're much more funded by the federal government at that point. And so we are part of that. We qualified for it. But for example, about 80% of our income now from the Free Food for All is coming federally instead of statewide. And so obviously that could be an impact as well.
It's also not Department of
It's not,
It's
no.
coming from the Department of Agriculture.
And so, yeah, I mean, the question is, are they grants? Are they, like, that's not really a grant, but if anything were to take place in there that would potentially have an impact, it could impact us.
And then the only other one is called the Easy Grant, EASI, and that's HEA. We actually just got another one last week, $80,000, which we're excited about that, which is going to empower service to sit with their staff as we're trying to figure out what is this beautiful plan of moving into Oak Street really going to look like. This is going to allow her to pay her staff to sit down and work on those nuances of what it looks like for those teams to come together, be separate. What does that mean? There's a lot of, what are the unintended consequences? So we're excited about that. There's another easy grant we're running on. So they have two currently. The other one is paying for Alicia Rushing as the biggest thing as a family health coordinator or family coordinator. We would think of a counselor. So those are the only federal grants at this time that we're really kind of tracking. When they did put a pause on the Head Start, the bigger issue is in some cases at that federal level, they're shutting down the portals. So there's two things. There's the system that manages it and then the money. So they put a pause on the money, but then if they shut down the system, right, they have two ways they can kind of create difficulties, we'll say. I'm trying to say be nice. We were able to get all of our payroll through that system last month. Sheila, who manages our grants, was able to get it all through, all the checks cashed, so to speak. So last month, where the biggest fear was, we navigated it. We'll see what next month brings.
Yeah, my biggest overall concern has been like, are there federal monies that go to the state that allow them to operate in different ways, or does that turn into the state has bigger cuts?
Those tend to be there. You've got a little bit of money on the special education side that does come through your BOCES. The bigger thing for us, I want to make it really simple in a board meeting, your state share versus your local share. If you change that proportion by removing the federal dollars, say in title, you could actually get a double hit. You have an exponential impact because then they back out the state dollars because of how the proportionality would work. It's a simple way to look at the seesaw of that, so no one knows what that unintentional thing would be. Even if they just put a pause on it, say for 6 months, it could mess up the whole state education finance formula and how it rolls out, creating a lot of emergency meetings. So, but again, I think we're in a good spot. I'm not like really stressed out about this. We're just trying to track it and remind ourselves that education is a state responsibility, not federal.
Okay, any other questions for anyone in the room? Hearing none, we'll take a 5-10 minute-ish break. As always, stay if you wish. If you need to go, understand you don't want to spend your whole night with us. Thank you.
Everyone just check your mics.
What? All right. Mike's back on, gang. Let's behave. All right, we're going to move through this. Looking for a motion on the consent agenda.
So moved.
Thank you, Jody.
For a second.
Thank you, Andy. Questions, comments? Ready for a vote.
All right. And that just scrolled to the next page. Dr. Breckenridge Pettit.
Aye.
Mr. Hobbs.
Aye.
Mrs. Lumber.
Aye.
Mrs. Pascal.
Aye.
Ms. Schickman. And Mr. Smith.
Aye. Okay, moving into discussion items. First one, 2025 school board election. Actually, we're turning this over to Kim to give an update.
Just a quick update, just a reminder that it is a school board election year. I have been in contact with both the Chaffey County clerks and recorder and the Fremont County clerk and recorder's office, just as yes, we are holding an election this year. So far as formal board action, I don't think we have to do anything until June. We just say, yes, we're participating. Does anyone need a reminder of who's up for election this year? Should I go over that real
I think
fast?
that'd be good.
We have all this information is available on the website if anyone else looking to check it out again later. This year, those who are up for re-election, Mandy, Joe, Jen, and Ben are the 4 who are up for election this year. So, and all 4 are eligible to run. That's kind of it. Any other kind of update, but it's time. Any questions or anything?
We will be running in the new districts, which doesn't really mean anything because none of us got shifted to a different district. But for those that may run against us, if we all choose to rerun for election. Okay. Easy peasy. We will move into the next one. Senior seminar curriculum. Jesse was not feeling well, so he went home, but I see he left David something to pass around and for us to look at and talk about. So,
I want to compliment our high school social studies team. I think they're really on point. I'm really excited when I sat with them as a team and what they're teaching. I think they're doing some good stuff. So that's the first part. Brady Hines is probably on point for that team for this class. This is part of the graduation requirements we inserted. And this will be the first class next year, the class of 2026, who will have to take this as per graduation requirements. The board set this up. It was more of a vision statement than a dictation on what the curriculum would be, and now we're at that point of the curriculum. The vision was we do not want to pass out diplomas without ensuring that each of our kids knows how to have civil dialogue. We have seen kind of some of our adult behaviors across the nation not be what we hope for our diplomas, and so that's what this course is about. They will be using as a reader the Bill of Obligations. That's not necessarily the textbook, but it'll be some of the main readings will come from the Bill of Obligations, which I know our community has read and looked at. And what we asked for tonight was just to kind of give you guys an update. This is not the night would you would approve it, but kind of a check-in to make sure we don't miss it. I think with a piece of paper, which was in your board packets, really helps you say, here would be the units that they're trying to address. And I think the first one is the key one, civil discourse, as well as controversial issues, making sure that people can know how to have an opinion, back it up with facts, evaluate the sources of those facts, as we know that there's so much struggle right now for Americans to try and figure out with our media and the echo chambers we get stuck in, and whether that's through Facebook feeds or whatever it might be. Having the kids really learn to do that, to back up an argument, so that they can support their idea without losing relationships, community. That's the purpose of this. And I think they're right in the middle of what our vision was, and I think they're on pace. But I wanted to pause and make sure I brought it to a public discussion. So we'll start there.
Who's teaching it, David?
Brady Hines is one right now who is set to teach it next year in the master schedule. So that's why he's on point.
So we'll do some word
I don't know exactly what it'll be in the modified block that they're looking at. How that'll be, I don't know the answer to that. There'll be focus. It's a senior class. It's not a freshman class. It's not one of those you jump ahead on. So, however many sections they need to make sure every kid can graduate, so either first scheduling priority, and then they'll figure out those juniors or that it works out well for them in rare cases.
So with modified block, I'm a little baffled. Would it be, before it was modified, would it be a skinny?
Yeah, it's a semester course.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Old school language. It's a semester course.
Thank you.
It's not a year round. Just like personal finance is a semester course. American government is a semester course.
So it would be a full block, but just for one
90
semester.
minutes.
Any other questions or concerns?
I mean,
he would
I think
turn
it's
you-
great, and I think he would be a wonderful person to have in that position.
Yeah, I think it actually was him in middle school that had them do
Yeah.
the media analysis
Yes.
before, like looking at a current topic from 2 different news sources. Yeah, no, I think it looks great.
I agree. I think it looks good. I think we're like 4 years from when we set the vision, give or take, and good to see we're finally getting to this point. And there were a few other topics of discussion that were in that vision, and the pathways are addressing those to a large extent. So good to see these things kind of come to a culmination, and also it's fascinating how fast time goes.
It also seems kind of good timing with like cell phones and all the things Michelle was talking about, with just looking at how the media shapes public perception. So I know it's more looking at, civics, but also I think kids learning how media just shapes public perceptions of themselves and their peers also.
And they do seem exposed to so much more than we were, given the recommended next video. So it'd be nice if they had some discernment on what they're seeing online.
I think the other part I like is when we talk about teaching thinking skills, this is a specific example of teaching thinking skills. Like, here's a structured argument, and here's the way the structured argument flows. Regardless of what your opinion is, this is how you organize thinking. And I think it's a great culmination course. We'll be looking at. I want to make sure to tell the public, it's not that we're going to be having our kids look at some spicy topic and pushing one thing, but we will have 18-year-olds and 17-year-olds look at some of the topics that they're going to have to vote on the next year or that year and say, how can I have a civil dialogue with someone else who might disagree with me? That's the outcome. And so not necessarily avoiding all topics that could be controversial. This is our last stage before we send them out to be citizens. So try the hard stuff under adult supervision with high structure to figure out how you do it, not a statement on what to think. It's not at all what this course is about. It's about learning how to think and how to express yourself as a good citizen, so that you can leave us and really advocate for your position when you become a voter. So, if there's no other questions, it's good for me.
Trust it goes.
Sounds good.
So it'll either be March or probably April, if I'm honest, where you'd see the actual curriculum for a vote. It's a curriculum. You have to approve all your curriculum.
Okay, moving into the next one, staff phone use and those various policies.
So I wanted to bring this up. Obviously, we're looking again at the student cell phones, and we've also talked about, like in the middle school, student computer use of screens, looking in depth. It has also then this other piece and part. How does our workforce, when they're supervising students, so trying to put boundaries around the conversation, we have nothing in our policy that says you may not be on your phone for personal use when you're supervising kids. So that could be obviously teaching. In addition, you've got things like recess and some of those other times when you're supposed to have your eyes on the kiddos and be the adult in the room watching out. So we will add that statement. What I wanted to just bring up, and there's no conclusion, I just wanted to publicly bring up that there's a struggle that we're going to continue to face, because it'll read, right? You cannot use your phone, staff member, when you're supervising students, unless it's work related or security emergency. right? Figure out whatever language the lawyer wants. Problem we run into now is any security aspect is going to be running on a communication system, which is going to be an app, which is on a phone. So it's the best metaphor I can have is just like we don't tell people we're going to buy you a car to get to work. That's part of being part of the workforce. We're moving over with apps now controlling our communication, where in order to be part of the workforce, your personal phone is going to have to run an app with your business. There's not really policy solutions for that, right? As I asked the lawyer, I said, do you have any district, right, who's got a policy solution for that? And she's like, nope. I'm like, so they're talking amongst themselves, but we see that. For us, right, on the app side of it, we are using something called Single Wire, which is the same thing the Pentagon uses, which runs an application that many people know, WebEx, which is amazing. There's lots of great things that ensures that our staff are keeping their communication professional and personal separate, right, which is really important to us working with minors. So we're using the same system as people like the Pentagon, but that's an app on a phone. And so you're going to be stuck in this position where you're saying, I need you to have this app on the phone. We go to working with the police and we're trying to think of what if situations and the kind of the scary situation, active shooter, and they want to be able to reach out to every classroom and check in on that teacher, those kids. It's going to be running on an app, right? It's going to be running on WebEx in this scenario for next year. That means it's a personal phone. You're getting this personal professional. So I just wanted to bring it up. It'll probably be a regulation policy. So it'll probably GBEE, and we'll add one that says -R, and it'll clarify some things of how we're going to try and navigate that. So you'll see that in your consent agenda to acknowledge that. I just wanted to give a little space to breathe that issue. I've also mentioned it to the association leadership, but here's an intro. Does anyone have any questions or comments they want to add in there?
Is that -R a negotiated policy too?
No.
-R.
No. There's a GC-R-N is another policy around professionalism. So I just kind of
Okay.
threw it in there to make sure everyone could see. That one is negotiated. That's more around,
Professional roads and ethics.
and that one we are going to be updating. You could expect that updated from CBT. Our lawyer really wants to see some changes in that. And it comes up, we'll go back to the last thing around senior seminar. In K-12 is not college. In K-12, the teachers are hired and teach the curriculum the board approves. They don't make up their own curriculums. Well, functionally, they kind of do make up their curriculums, just like the last thing, and you guys review it, but they're the experts, right? But there is this relationship. That's what GCR in. And so just want to make sure those are talking together. So I brought it into the mix.
I'm a little outside the box of this conversation, but are those apps and our communications kind of have its own dedicated kind of back channels, like kind of emergency services, or are they kind of along with everything else? And if we have a wireless issue, then those apps and communications are lost.
Yeah, a good example is yesterday, Cisco North America went down. And so we had problems with our systems talking from the school building to the outside user, but internally it worked. But that's an example where if the system crashes like Cisco North America, then your system's down.
Yeah, I'd just be curious if there's a way to kind of attach it similar to how first responders have to some of those emergency situations, or they have their own kind of dedicated line offline of the major network.
It won't be that space at this time. One of the things you're going to hear from Josh, not for this summer, but probably next summer, is we'll be setting up our own dedicated 5G system. So we will take towers off our buildings, trying to leverage E-rates, their dollars, so that, and then what you would do is you take your phone, basically, Josh, someone smart with technology, kind of subdivides your phone and you get a different electronic SIM card. So you have 2 or 3 SIM cards on your phone, and then a teacher would be on a dedicated 5G, which then wouldn't be hit, because a lot of times what happens in a small town particularly, everyone's like, oh, I'll use my cell phone, and then 50,000 people descend from the media and the whole cell phone system crashes, which we see during festival season in those towns. So 5G solutions probably 12, 18 months away. to try to bring up some more of our strength. But if they cut a line between our town on like the network, the fiber network, and going out either Canyon or out the other way, then the town's down, and then same situation.
Yeah, well, and I'm sure we have the safety protocols in place that we're not relying just on teachers' personal cell phones. So that's like a nice backup or other options. But
Every
even
classroom
bringing
has a
that down.
hardwired
Yeah.
phone in that situation.
Yeah.
It's just, we're going to start to run across that sticky widget there. And so I just want to name it so no one's surprised when we do. Because we'll definitely be putting a sentence in there that says you can't be on your cell phone when you're supervising kids. Good examples, though, just so you know, like a SPED teacher who's got, say, 5 or 6 kids that have high behavior needs, they're using their cell phone with other teachers to try and figure out, like, oh, this kid's really having a bad day. How do we, they're triangulating those things and they're using their cell phones because they're highly effective in that situation. That would be a work-related scenario that you can imagine.
Yeah, and I hope teachers understand that that's obviously not something the board is trying to get involved in. Their communication with the front office, their communication with
Right.
other teachers. This is really a student-facing situation.
So that's it. I just want to make sure I name some unintended consequences around security and the app world as it's developing as we try and work with our local PD to do all the what if scenarios. And that's really, I think, important. It's exhausting to think of every what if and now to have a backup to a backup to a backup. The most probable things are very easily managed. It's the double and triple what if scenarios that people are trying to problem solve for. And some of those just can't be problem solved.
So we anticipate a first reading in the March meeting and just making sure this is all wrapped up before.
I would guess
school
you're going to
year.
get a regulation policy, brand new, and it would just be either March or April, depending on the lawyer's turnaround. And it would just be an acknowledge and consent and be done.
Little alignment starting from.
Starting in the fall. All these changes around technology will be starting in the fall. When we get to the student policy one, I got some other comments, but that's the staff one. I just wanted to say it out loud and make sure it's publicly known.
Okay, we will move into action items then. So we're looking to approve on second reading policies. JICJ, student use of cell phones.
So moved.
And the second?
I know there's going to be some discussion around this one. So
I'm talking to the lawyer. We just went with keeping kind of the policy as is, a few minor changes to that. One, that policy that board members called me, so I want to name it, is I think it's like the 4th paragraph on the main policy moving from, if a student has a cell phone on campus during academic hours, they will have a consequence. It will be taken, not may.
That's, yeah.
I choose not the word may.
The word may.
Yes, that was
So
my-
if you approve it tonight, it is with the change from may to will in that paragraph. And then talking to the lawyer, it was, we're better off putting the rest in a regulation policy. And then that's where I tried to bridge a gap, and you guys will have to tell me, because we kind of had a 50-50 split last month. Is it all distractions technology or just phones? The recommendation from administration is just phones. They tried to write the regulation policy to say if there's somewhere where a kid's smartwatch becomes the problem, then the principal can sit with the parents and say, this is a problem. It needs to go away, and then they can be treated the same way. So that's how I tried to bridge the gap between those two things. And again, a reminder of today it's phones, tomorrow might be watches. Google glasses are just behind we're just around the corner, and there's another technology thing.
What was the rationale for just phones? Because a lot of the other, a couple other district policies that I read seem to be a little bit broader encompass.
The principals didn't think they could actually enforce it. And then they also thought they're going to be getting themselves into situations they don't want to be in terms of like I'll just give you a story. Maybe is that a smartwatch you have on, or are you just a poor kid who's trying to look like you have a smartwatch, and then determining is that smartwatch there. And then the other piece on watches, because that's the next big one, is they're not seeing it as a huge issue, because like if you're going to text on your watch, it's letter by letter kind of thing. It's not quick and easy. So I would expect at some point that might change, but at the moment it's not a distraction. So that's there. Also, the principals, when they look at their money and where they would recommend it, they would rather see us get more curriculum, instruction support, having better classes to engage kids than spending the money on the things like yonder pouches. People talk about those, or the staff necessary to manage those things. And most of the districts who have gone to yonder pouches are reporting out not high effectiveness to our principals in terms of the kids are beating that game effectively. So that's the recommendation of the why.
And have all of the principals kind of come around? Because I know some of them were maybe thinking they did want the under pouches, but now they feel comfortable not having
I
them.
think that's where they've all settled, when they're like, I don't want to spend my money on extra staff and that equipment. I'd rather have teachers having better lessons and engage kids.
Yeah, I think people would be shocked at the cost on that, right? Tens of thousands of dollars per school.
Yeah, plus you'd have to have the staff,
Yeah.
because there's two ways they do it. You either hand the pouch to the kid and say, put your phone in there and put it in your backpack. So now you're not, and you keep the lock basically. And so now, because you don't want to have that $600 device on your watch is a bad word, under
On your
your responsibility. So they try and pass that back to the kid, and the kids are beating that system when it wouldn't take much creativity to beat that system. Or they're having to hire somebody to be, they call it the coat checker, who sits there every day and line up the kids, and 400 kids at the door, and check and make sure they're all going in pouches, and that nuance. And I don't want the responsibility of those. That'd be $20,000,
Just the burner phone
$30,000
anyway.
technology,
Burner
and they'll
phone's in
just
the
hand you a
pocket.
burner phone that it's not like you're going to check service and do all the things necessary to. The kids have been winning those kind of games against adults for all eternity.
So do we have a good plan? I mean, I like leaving it kind of general. That said, like, staff member must confiscate item and deliver it to the main office. Do they have a plan for how that's going to work? Because our staff doesn't really have time to walk to the office between.
Yeah, I think we're all
classes.
there. It's not an elaborate plan. They're just knowing, like, take the high school where you're going to have the most adolescents. They just know that Abigail and Jesse are going to just have to spend their first week doing a big discipline push, and the second week on the short list. And then all the schools who've done this have reported back to us that after that second week, you're down to a very short list of kids who are struggling for different reasons.
So initially, it'll just be call Jesse and Abby, and
They'll probably wander up and down the halls and collect them.
And they seem
That's how I
very
would do it if I was
interested
a
in doing
principal.
it, and it sounds great. And to help preserve that teacher-student relationship that we've all discussed.
And the schools have talked about just having a fresh start. That's what we're saying at the beginning of the year, not trying to push it earlier. Like, everybody knows it's coming, and you, like all adolescent things, it's coming, and then you're going to have to back up what you say. And once you've done that a couple times, then you see the behavior change. So
yeah, well, a friend had sent me an article that I sent on to David, kind of talking about the under pouches and how they weren't super effective and kids were working their way around them. And just over and over again, the quotes in the article were, the pouches are as effective as your administration is in implementing the consequences. So, I mean, one thing I was thinking too, just like with student council at the high school right now, like maybe trying to get some of those student leaders on board, and can we, like, throughout April and May, have them start doing some sort of push of this is going to happen next year. I mean, I know there's multiple kids at the high school who have given up social media on their own because they felt like freshman year it was super damaging, distracting, and they didn't want it. So I don't know about, even having kids share stories about, like, this is why I
that's
gave
the
it up.
intent.
This is why
Next month, depending on, assuming you guys approve that in a second, is then starting to work with the student body, both at the middle school and the high school, both alternative and traditional. We also, the kids need to make sure we've given the explicit lessons of the why. And then having them, can they improve whatever that plan is from the adults to make it a smooth transition? So that's the intent, is then goes from the counseling kind of wellness team to start engaging the kids directly, in student councils or whatever, student leadership to design that last push. I say that because I'm not going to put a third reading in front of you probably until May. It may be the June board meeting, because there's also been legislation that's been put to the floor. Right now, it looks like it just simply says boards have to have a policy, which doesn't really guide us, but I want to watch that develop. I want to see some things at the federal level, and I want this time now for the students to be able to come in and get that final thing. Maybe they make some changes. Just give it a chance to breathe, because once we get through this reading, I should have enough clarity from you guys to get it right for the third reading, but probably sit on it till May or June.
Well, if we approved a third reading in March and then decided to change things based on state legislation, we'd have to start the process in third.
Pretty much.
Yeah, let's not do that.
So we'll put a pause on it as my recommendation.
And David, do you think one more thing as a practical matter, can we, or you, speak to the principals and tell them what we heard from other schools of what they did in their lunchrooms and find out if there's a way we can support them somehow, the district or even the community? I'm sure people would be happy to buy some Jengas or whatever to just sort of do what
I think-
other schools are doing that has worked for them.
Yes, and sure, the principals, I think that's the sort of things we're also looking for the student body to say,
Yeah.
okay, well, can I have a ping pong table? And why can't we fold it up and roll it over here? Like, is it really going to damage the gym floor? And go through those different conversations, or what other things do the kids say? Or we're buying foosball, or some other things
Something
like that.
positive.
You know?
Yeah.
So yes, and that's where I'm hoping the kids can help us answer the questions of what they think would be a positive use of their time. I think they're going to be really dialed into that effective space.
Well, and I guess I want to back up to the smartwatch conversation, because
Yep.
I'm one of those that I think we want to make this as easy as possible and as manageable for the principals.
Yep.
And when you're talking about the smartwatch, that seems like a very gray area to me again.
Yep.
Like I feel like they're going to battle that unless it's all or, I mean,
It's got to be black or white for
and
adolescents.
I feel like we're back to that may. Oh, we may take it if it's a smartwatch. And so I'm for no smartwatches included in the ban.
Okay.
Also with the students who can't afford it, it just, they don't have them. So
It becomes a status problem.
it's a status problem again. So I guess for those two reasons, to make it easier, just black and white, include it. But
I mean,
Hey,
I
Karen,
guess.
have you talked to any administrators about this?
No,
Because
that's why
I have been,
okay,
and I trust them. They're saying, please don't do this.
with
They're
the
saying,
smartwatches.
if it becomes an issue, trust that we will let you know, and you can update the policy, or we can handle it at our school. But I would encourage you just to talk to them, because this is already providing a lot of work for them, and I really want it to be successful. And they don't seem to be indicating to me that they believe it will be as successful with the phones if we start getting off track. So,
I think we can deal with it in the short term with the way I wrote the regulation policy. I mean, even be wordsmith a little bit for next year. And if we find that that's the next thing that pops, then we can come back and add it. The second thing is, there are some families, I think it's the minority, who are worried about a security, and they're playing the what if thing. By allowing the watch and this strategy, it does allow those families to make a decision to soothe their need to be connected to their kid in a more.
So those are all the families that have the money to send their children to school with
We have not
smartwatches.
to date really seen a less affluent family deeply concerned. about
or
this.
I think as someone mentioned last month, like elementary school kids who are riding their bikes to school, like some of those parents have a gizmo watch, which is not a giant financial burden, but asking that first or second grader when they get to school to take that watch off probably means that watch is gone, and maybe never coming home, and then maybe that kid doesn't get to ride their. But I just think maybe that's silly, but I think those are some of the unintended consequences.
No, I
So
definitely heard that from multiple families of elementary school kids, that they don't want elementary kids' watches being taken away, because that is how they've been able to give their kids freedom, by giving them watches. And I mean, I agree with you with the equity piece, but at the same time, I feel like we can't make policy necessarily based on that argument, because it's the shoes, it's the coats, it's the backpacks, it's the cell phone, it's
The car.
it's everything. So while I agree that the smartwatch is maybe a status and more equity, I don't think it is any more so than any of the other things that our kids are wearing or going to school. So I don't know that I would make a policy based on that argument.
So Karen, I was exactly where you were. I understood the social emotional trauma of social media. And then at last month's communication session, I was learned about the distractions. And so I went to Jen and I said, you know, why are the principals and leadership saying, let's keep the distractions and just focus on the emotional trauma, right, of social media, because this is a distraction. And they said, this is more important. This distractions will be mitigated so much, and this is just 400 grit. And so I kind of went with her statement of, you know, just trust them. And
Right, and I understand all that, and I do trust them, and I want them to have the final say, obviously. I think I was just thinking, is now the time to do it, or do we, you know, if we do this now, and then next year we do this, and I just feel like it's
that I
kind of
don't
wishy-washy.
know. That I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that is.
It would have been easier to
That's a
just
great point.
go in and just do it, you know, but we can, yeah, give it a try.
I see that point. On this one, I think you're always gonna have to come back.
I mean, I was kind of with you too, Karen, too, and I've kind of, I mean, I've been all over on where I've been on this. And I mean, initially I thought the yonder bounces are probably a good idea, and I'm like, no, it's a bad idea. But I like this policy seems to take a good middle ground. It does allow for the building administrators to deal with the smart watches if they see there's an issue with them.
And I think in some ways you could argue that the earbuds are more of an issue. Like,
And that's why I
when
listed
people
those.
have those noise canceling earbuds in, they legit cannot hear anything. So I feel like if kids are wearing those in class, that's more of a distraction than anyone.
Except for the teachers have them wear them in class
Well,
while they're
that's,
using the computers.
Right. So yeah. So I'm just saying I think that
But I
gets a
agree in
little
the
trickier
hallway.
too, right? And I
Yeah.
know the teachers had specifically mentioned like they didn't want this to be having earbuds necessarily either.
And that's
Do you
what, well, sorry, just in talking to administrators, they seem pretty confident that if they saw a kid in the hall with earbuds, that they would say, you're using your phone. And have
there's
that
like a direct
conversation.
connection.
Which technically for this policy, it just says if you make yourself home visible. Oh no, uses or makes yourself invisible. So I guess that would still constitute use.
I tried to think of all my arguments I've had with teenagers as an administrator across the years as I wrote this.
Put all the words in.
I did also put in there, just remember, I'll take a kid with diabetes, right? That's either phone or watch. That's good. You're going to see exceptions for that. And I'm sure the kid who needs it for diabetes will probably do the adolescent thing and then play music on it or whatever. I'm sure like we'll navigate that. SPED is another space where there's accommodations for like speech to text. There's be some things where we're going to get into a space and the SPED teacher's going to go, well, now what do you want me to do? And that's why we went with a regulation policy that would allow us to go into those spaces and go, oh, we got to add this one phrase, and we can do that pretty nimbly next year. If we stumble into one of those exceptions where we put ourselves in a corner we didn't mean to be in, rather than having you guys do 3 readings or some sort of public massive dialogue to deal with one SPED kid's
Yeah.
accommodation needs.
Well, and there's so many things that we just as a school board don't know about if we're not in the school, right? Like kids who have the legal right to listen to music. And we now know that like the high school has made that available on their computers so that they can not be on their phone. Just things that we don't encounter.
Yeah, I would say I have 2 components here and nothing really necessarily about policy. I think it's fine and follow the recommendation, but your idea from however long ago of a tech-free week, would love to see if something like that before this policy is implemented could just be tried with our student leadership and pick a week and see how it goes with current people and to just maybe it'll give us some good feedback before we finalize the policy. And then I think just like, you know, for the 3 people listening at home on YouTube, like there's been a lot of questions and like, what does this mean? And it's kind of like, it is, you're bringing it to school, you're keeping it in your backpack. If it's seen, it's being taken, and you will be, as a adult parent, guardian, however that proper chain would be, are going to be required to come pick that up from the school for your student to have it back. So just kind of clarity of those kinds of things for the 3 people listening at home.
Well, 5.
5 people listening at home.
I just
And
want to, go ahead.
And with that, you had mentioned expulsion, and I think, yeah, that maybe is going too far?
Well, just
I mean, if the parent has to keep coming back 20 times, you would hope that that would solve the problem.
that's how I tried to write the regulation
Okay.
policy. It's not a phone issue then. It's about some sort of authoritarian development, and that's a whole different conversation. Principals have to navigate, and there's policy already to deal with that.
Good.
So I try to write it in the regulation policy so it passes itself off without putting a principal into some sort of
Right.
3 strikes. So I know because what you get is an adolescent who pushes it in the first 2 weeks of school, and then January doesn't think about it and makes a mistake, and all of a sudden you're into an accidental. I don't want to put the principals in that scenario. It's not a gotcha. I think the other thing I just want to add is this isn't a school problem. And I always worry about schools solving problems because then we adopt it as our problem. We didn't make this problem, and it's not our problem. This is a family problem about how America is dealing with our own brains and our development, how we're dealing with social media, how we're dealing with information. This is the things we have locus of control over, but our key thing and the reason this policy exists is to hand these conversations back to families so that the parents can have a conversation with their kid around learning to handle these workplace scenarios and to take back control. It's not our responsibility. We have control over those 32 hours a week. We can exert that, but that's not really the issue. The issue is what happens at 11 o'clock at night when you're by yourself in your bedroom and you're just scrolling for 50 hours. Adults do it. Kids are no different. And we want to hand this back to families for them to put their values back in play. And for those 32 hours for kids to have that space and that freedom to be kids again. That's what we have control over, and that's all we're doing. The rest is being given back to the families for their values to be implemented with their kids' lives.
Yeah.
One thing I would add to that is the part that is a school problem is that our culture is so used to phones that we have created a culture in our schools, some of our schools, where if there's free time, phones are allowed. So I think that's going to be kind of the biggest push with staff is no, you're teaching bell to bell for one, and two, when your kids have free time, they're reading a book, they're playing a game, they're talking to each other, you're taking them outside. So I think that is the piece of it that is a school problem, is that we have allowed lots of phone use as the filler of free time at school.
Right.
So that is the piece that is our problem, that is our fault, that this policy will help us.
Yes, and frankly, my biggest concern is working is that it's classroom approved use.
And
Clear.
will it be our problem, and do we need to start considering anything in the budget for maybe some ping pong tables and some,
I'll tell you in May or June.
okay.
And the building budget should be able to handle things like foosball table and ping pong.
Okay.
If they can't, Aaron and I will either figure it out or come back to you and ask for a ping pong table if we get really stuck. But I think we have robust
That's
enough
under your
budgets.
authority. You know.
Okay.
I think I can solve a ping pong table.
Well, it would be 3 ping pong tables.
Right.
Yeah, and Karen, to address the expulsion / suspension piece, I understand there may get to a point where there's got to be some more severe consequences, but the last thing we want to do is take our students out of the building. So
I mean, I was also going to add to that piece because it is still on that other document. It mentions maybe, I would like to take that fully off that other document. But I think the other piece of that is rather than an expulsion, that could be a student that certainly has to show up to the office, turn in their phone to Jesse, and then get it at the end of the day.
Right.
So there are plenty of ways to solve that. If it's becoming an habitual problem, parents aren't picking it up, parents aren't engaged with the policy, you can work one-on-one with the kid with that
It's great.
without expelling them.
That makes perfect sense.
David, before we close out on this topic, there was that survey that folks could voluntarily participate in. Has there been any?
No additional feedback from the
Nothing
community on
else?
that.
Okay, thank
I
you.
will just say at Heart of Rockies Regional Medical Center, almost all the doctors have written you a letter of support to please take this stand and make this change. I've never in my career seen that. So that's a big letter of support. It's not a small issue from all of your medical practitioners are asking you to take this stand. So I think that should be noted. And definitely the majority would support you in this. I know there's always a minority who has a different opinion.
okay, ready for a vote?
All
All right, Dr. Breckenridge Pettit.
Aye.
Mr. Hobbs.
Aye.
Mrs. Lundberg.
Aye.
Mrs. Pascal.
Aye.
Ms. Schiffman. Aye. And Mr. Smith.
Aye. Considering, just to be. All right, looking for a vote or a motion, excuse me, to approve updated strategic financial plan 2025 review.
So
Second.
Okay. David, Aaron, want to give some feedback to this one?
I'll start, and Aaron, you. Sure.
Go ahead.
There's two different things. You've already kind of got the proportionality. It was in the annual report. So it's kind of what your review is of how's this plan working. Our intent by putting this on the monitoring board for every year is there's a time every February for you to look at it. February seems like the right time before we head into initial budget seasons to make sure how's our plan working. We did add to the plan. We saw this last year. Our fund balance grew more than we expected. And we didn't have any triggers pre-planned of how to deal with that. And so Aaron and I, step 7 on page 3 was added. That would say, here's the tolerance. And if you exceed that tolerance, then here's how we're going to disperse that money. And a lot of times, remember, that happens not from bad things. You have to budget for worst case scenario. Worst case scenario doesn't happen. That means your reality comes in less than your plan. That creates that discrepancy. And there needs to be, though, an improved tolerance. And if something weird happens and you're outside the tolerance, what happens versus just the fund balance growing. So, Aaron, anything else you want to add? And then board members.
No, I don't think so. I mean, yeah, the 2025 review is largely what you already saw in the community report, and then just added a couple things to it. But yeah, I think the language we added is just based on it's not a policy. End of the day, we still have to come back and approve it in the budget and so on and so forth. But I think it's just, again, we're kind of dictating intent of what is our tolerance. I know there's been a lot of question marks about that in the past many years, as we've talked about negotiations. We've asked the auditor almost every year, what's the correct fund balance to have? And this seems like it's a fairly appropriate amount based upon conversations with them. And so the question is kind of, what is the trigger when something goes really well and we end up with extra money and we don't want to be in difficult spaces? What's the intent? What are we trying to do? So I think this was just kind of built off of the plan from earlier in terms of percentages. And it's something that would hopefully take some of the stress off of all parties, if there's something in here that says basically this is the intent of what we're trying to do. In the end, it's not a policy, it's just intent.
Yeah, my only two comments would be like, obviously, this is the first time we're doing it, so if next year it seems more appropriate to do this in April, something after the budget cycle,
Okay.
there's no stickiness to the February piece. And I think the new language added, I have a little bit of reservations about it, just from some negotiating scars and different things like that. So I may say to wordsmith a little bit to make sure it's very clear that it's kind of like recurring dollars, but I don't know if that's appropriate, because I don't want the sale of a property that the district decides to do turns into you're supposed to divvy that up based on this intentional statement type thing. So, but I know it's not necessarily recurring dollars either. So it's just, that's my sticky wicket with this one. It's just trying to make sure that I agree with the intent in a general sense, like having a threshold and making sure that, yeah, this is kind of our intent if we have an excess, but I don't want to get caught into another situation where it's like, well, you had money, but then you put it in a assigned reserve or whatever, and so it's less, and it's like I just don't want to go down that road.
Yeah,
So
I
don't
think
know how you could wordsmith it to make sure that that's there if we feel comfortable that that's there.
Yeah, I think the only comment I'd make on that is that's why it specifically talks about Fund 10, is because when we sell an asset, you've already taken the intention to put that into Fund 43, and so that won't cause the Fund 10 balance to grow. So I'm not as concerned by that, as long as we're diligent on making sure we take the correct action. Because I agree with you, we don't want that to become, that's not the intent of what we're trying to do. We're trying to say if the plan of our general fund comes out and we're off by too much, what's the triggers? I've heard board members say, hey, we have to spend this fund balance. The goal is never to get overly too high. And so I think the way to just basically say like, this is the trigger point where Fund 10 balance goes above that. That's where we're really concerned. So that I understand what you're saying. We can wordsmith it more if you'd like us to. But that was kind of the intent of the Fund 10 versus all funds, basically. And for context, like what does 30% actually mean? I mean, 3% Tabor this year is 638,000 on our audit. So like it would have been if our fund balance in total in Fund 10 had gone above 6.3 million. Well, from context and conversations over the past few years, I think almost everyone from what I've heard has said that's a point where we've reached too much, and we need to find a way to mitigate that. And we shouldn't just be perpetually putting money in that fund balance. So I don't even know if that's the right number in terms of 30%. There can be disagreements on that, but that gives you context of what that number would actually look like.
So the 12% and 3% that are Tabor and board restricted, those can't be used for payroll, right? To avoid this cash flow scenario. Those are kind of like locked away.
So two things there. They're locked away. Yes, I mean it's not money that you have in an account. Like it's money. It's money that you're basically committing to not spending, so that you have a cushion.
Right.
But so that we're still. That's not 15% is not enough to cover the 0% cash flow loan. Like that is not enough cash to cover our payroll throughout the course of the year.
So what percentage is enough to cover payroll?
At this point, 30% recovered. 6 million recovered. But I would also say
So that's why you chose the 30% is because that's the 6 million to cover payroll without taking out the loan.
yes and no, actually, because I think it depends. Because also, if you include Fund 43 in your cash, then you don't need a full 30% of reserves to cover your payroll, right? Like we did the CAP project earlier today, and if you end up saving appropriately and spending out of that, but saving appropriately, you use that as cash flow, which is something that we can do. I mean, in the case of the COP and the sale of Spartan Heights, for example, when we did that, that's money that's sitting there to cover the COP, but we get to use it as cash flow every year as well. So then we don't have to have 30% reserve. So it's not necessarily built on the 0% loan problem. I think it was based upon the auditors continually communicating how many days you kind of need to have. And so a lot of them were saying, well, 30% is about, that puts you at that like 45 to 60 day range that you could have of operating. Many districts have more than that. I don't personally feel it's appropriate to have much more than that because I think at some point, do we really want to say we're going to operate for half a year with a major financial downturn with everything? I think that's, you want to pay your bills for the year that you're given the money for that. I don't think we want to rob from today's students for the what if of tomorrow's students. So I think you have to come up with some number. So again, I think that number could be discussed, but it's not all about the cash flow loan because you can deal with the cash flow loan in other ways besides just the 30%. It's certainly if you had no additional money, that 30% would cover it. But I think it was largely just a starting point based upon the conversation with the auditor, the conversation that we had last year, and the conversation with CPT. It was kind of this is a beginning point to have that conversation.
I think also just Aaron and I's trying to give a recommendation, like where's that comfort level? You start to go to say 40%, I'm like, it's kind of hard for me to say that makes sense, right? So there's also just a natural thing from staff saying, much more beyond this, you need to have a reason that you discuss publicly of why that's there. And it's just I think the most important thing from Aaron and I is pre-building a trigger. And there's a starting point, and maybe it's 32% is the right number. And maybe the next iteration of the board is a different number. What I would still, I think from Aaron and I's perspective, is making sure there's a trigger there that the board is evaluating that concept. So it doesn't just unintentionally grow and then there's a surprise, 3 or 4 years later, because no one's really been forced to evaluate that concept. That's the most important thing from my perspective, leadership wise, is intentionality of that. The actual trigger number is the lesser important thing. I don't know if Aaron, you'd add to that or if that matches your thoughts.
No, yeah, I would just agree. I mean, I think the number is less important. I think the next board might say that's not our priority to have 30%. It's our priority to have 40% or 20% or whatever their risk tolerance is. I think this is one where you're currently really close to this. In total fund balance in the general fund, we were just under 6 million. And like I said, it would have been 6.4 basically. So you're really close to this at this point. So that was one point we were like, okay, we're at a starting point. We've been pretty intentional with fund balance over the past few years. So it's kind of a starting point there, but at the same time, we're not putting ourselves in any danger. I'm comfortable with a smaller number to some extent, although you have to, if you're comfortable with a smaller percent, then you have to be comfortable saying if there's an economic downturn, we have to cut programming of people. And so, yeah, you have to be in the private sector. That's where I've lived my whole life, and I am very comfortable with that. That is how you operate. And so I'm very much a fan of the government gives us money to spend on kids this year, and we need to be really wise with how we use those funds. And at the same time, that doesn't mean we shouldn't be saving anything, but at the same time, you've been incredibly good in the way that you save and you manage your money, and it's put you in a good position. And so I think that you also can say the trigger is the important part. What are you holding me accountable to? I think is more than anything else. I don't want to get to the end of this year and suck at budgeting and you not have a reason to say, okay, how do we fix this? There needs to be accountability. I mean, I say me, but on me, David, assistant superintendent, whoever that is, there needs to be a trigger that I think is publicly put into place that allows for accountability in that position. At least for us to explain what we're doing and why we're taking those actions instead of getting to the end of the year and be like, why did the fund balance grow that much? And now what do we do? Like, I think having some type of accountability and action plan is smart.
Yeah, in general, I agree with it. I think I share a little bit of Joe's hesitancy and sort of, categorically sort of earmarking this ahead of time. You have language in there, will be distributed 80-20. I'd probably massage that language a little bit. If you have a big capital improvement project, because that language I could see very well coming back to haunt the district at some point. And, you said, well, not may or something else. So I'd probably want to see that massaged a little bit to give the district a little more discretion to allocate its funds. Obviously, I agree with the intention of distributing most to the employees, but there may be a year when we don't want to do that. If you have a significant issue that needs to be addressed. Otherwise, second point is I wonder if was CBT or anybody involved in this? I know they're sort of involved in this development of this on the front end. I don't know if they're
Not to this date, no.
I did bring it up at the last CBT meeting and said we're trying to look at some trigger, and that we had looked at some numbers based upon that. I mean, since then, that was something that we did, that we put into this, basically saying, hey, what do we do for this year to put something in? I agree. I think CBT needs to be involved in the conversation. And again, that's one of the things too, to your will statement. I think we can massage this. This is not policy. If we need to change it to this is intent, like the board is not obligated to do this. It is not a policy that you're putting into place. And so if we need to change the language to try to be more, this is the intent, but this is potentially the reality, I'm more than comfortable to do that. And I think CBT can be involved in the conversation of what that looks like as well, and should be. I think for me, there is something to be said about it. I'd like to have something that demonstrates our intent. So I'm not sold on it being this. I'm not sold on it being done immediately. It's just my recommendation based upon the quickest.
Well, I agree with what you're saying, Matt, but at the same time, if we're sort of wanting to do 80 to 85% to staff as our goal, if we do end up with a large surplus and then we spend 80% of it on projects and 20% on staff, I would imagine that goes below that 80% number overall, probably.
I mean, if you mean in the course, if you took the whole year.
Yeah, I mean, just like it seems like if we have a big surplus and we only give 20% of that surplus to staff, then would we likely fall below our goal of 80% of our total budget to staff?
Yeah, I see. I follow.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I mean, yeah, if you're budgeting 80 to 85, you're always going to be really close to the low end of 80 that hits the actuals. So like last year, for example, you saw we actually spent 79% of our revenues. Now we retained about 2.5% 80% of our revenues because our expenditures were less than our revenues. So yeah, if you went less than 80%, you would definitely be guaranteeing that you're lower in a year like that than hitting that 80% mark.
Yeah, I think it's, I mean, it's some wordsmithing. I don't know if I love the idea of tabling until we wordsmith it, but to me, having a trigger point that matches the intent of what we already said above, like, makes a lot of sense that we reallocate the excess to these categories or these priorities. That makes, kind of just fits in, and but it gives a trigger point that's there. So, I mean,
So just process, I would just recommend then, why don't you guys just table it? Give me whichever board member is going to work with Aaron and I, or two of you, to wordsmith it, and then we can put it back in consent agenda next month or whenever it's ready. If like we've had a good public discussion, I think we can wordsmith it in that sense and get it done. So just, that would be my recommendation from a process standpoint.
Yeah, and the last thing I would just say too, to Matt's point about CPT, I think us getting something written into intent for this year and then still bringing it up and discussing it, I think satisfies both meetings. Because I think right now there's nothing in there about intent. And I think or there is, but there's nothing in what if it goes over. I don't see how this would impact negatively that conversation. To then say, hey, we put something in place this year, and also let's continue to workshop it. So I don't think so. I mean, I'm happy to be corrected on that.
I think that's the benefit of having an annual review. Like you just keep updating your strategies, circumstances change.
So can we not need the two board members to work on it?
so you tell them
Joe and
Matt and I, since we picked the ball.
Joe and I. Feels right.
Okay, perfect. So process-wise, I believe we need Mandy to make a motion to table
Okay, I'll make a motion to table.
and second it by Karen.
What am I doing?
You seconding
Second.
to
Second.
table? Okay.
One for you guys wordsmithing, I do think that first sentence doesn't make sense. Like, I understand what it means, but it reads weird. Like, we have a goal of no more than 30%, so that we need to take a cash loan. Like, it kind of feels like a double negative kind of thing, right?
We'll add some periods.
You could fix that.
If you want to give us some minutes ahead of time, we'll consider that.
You'll set aside your.
Nominating board member to nominate.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll move on to, where are we now?
E, approved
E.
2025.
You do have to take a vote on table.
Oh, okay.
Ready to vote for table.
Dr. Breckenridge Bennett,
Hi.
Mr. Hobbs,
Right.
Mrs. Lumberg,
Hi.
Mrs. Pascal,
Aye.
Ms. Schickman, and Mr. Smith.
Okay, now moving to, looking for a motion to approve 2025 review to strategic facility plan.
So moved.
Thanks, Jody.
Second.
Amanda. Any questions, comments on this one? I know we tabled this before, so hopefully we got through some review time. And David, I don't know if you have anything to say, but
I had a couple board members, just some wordsmithing stuff, but still the intent is to be clear of enrollment's up. It's matching your demographic study. There's no reasons there's no data to say anything other than that's what you'll see next year. You have exceeded design capacity, and this board's current opinion is to delay any bond or any tax as long as possible. And so 2030 would be the earliest this board's interested in considering that. And I know many of you are interested in delaying it further. You still have concerns of whether a statewide decrease in student population won't find its way to Salida, even though we are an anomaly and are growing with most of us. So I think that's what we tried to capture in that update.
yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with those pieces. If we see a large spike in enrollment again for whatever reason, like, not saying I would move my dates up, but I would definitely want to have more discussion regarding is improving the modulars the best use of our funds, which might still be a requirement and a necessity due to the time that it would take to pass a bond, to build a new facility, so on and so forth. But
Normally it's a 3-year process, just to give you guys a sense of when you say we're going to go run a bond, from that vote to the day students are being served in that addition or that new building, you're 3 years away. So that's where consultants would say you should go sooner than later, because you're running the risk of having to pull in tons of modulars. Problem with modulars, of course, is they don't many times solve the real problem. They're not big enough to run a full classroom. That way they get divided up. And so you just get into a sticky widget, just saying it out loud. You are on track. Not this year, it's not being recommended, but you should not be surprised next year, this time, if we're having to say you have to add a modular. You cannot add a teacher at Longfellow. You cannot really add a teacher at the middle school. So the only way to solve that with more kids is to increase class size. So the high school is in good shape because of our partnership with CMC and how you guys have addressed the Kessner building. So that'll do well. We're okay, and we can add teachers there as we have more kids. But same thing with ECC. You cannot hire another teacher, so your and those class sizes can't grow by federal law. So that's why you have the waiting list, right? So that's the sticky widget you're in right now. But I agree with everybody. Let's wait until get the high school paid off in 2030 and then see where we're at in reality.
When is the Montessori school going to be done?
It should be opened up next school year. So August.
And they're increasing their capacity by how many, do you remember?
Basically, it's almost a zero.
Yeah,
It's
they
supposed to be
almost zero.
just house who they have, and it's a best grant, which, as we know very well, really limits you to only build a building to the kids you have.
So any growth coming into the district is coming to us.
Yeah. We'll see how it plays out in reality, but yes, it's coming to us.
Two students, they have two students, no student spaces.
Yeah, I'd be real curious, just anecdotally, with the modulars we have, or the freebies, if I recall,
They were free, yes.
and just improved technologies and construction, and we have a 3D printed home in Chaffey County. I would just, not saying that's the best solution, but just would be really interested to see how.
You should plan on $250,000 to buy and plant, basically, put it in there and hook up all the safety technology, sewer, water, heat. $250,000 to be what the budgetary impact to put a temporary modular on.
I'll just be curious if there's some better modular or temporary facilities based on construction technology advances.
I
We
mean,
can look at that, or we can look at yurts. Either
I
way.
think the
Yeah,
other
that's-
comment
Yeah,
that I would
yours.
say is specifically looking at like Corey's enrollment report. Like I think that's one of our biggest benefits is that we have small enrollment, but we have very small class sizes compared to what the rest of the state and urban districts are dealing with. So I do think that there is room for class sizes to increase at Longfellow. I know we don't have room to add teachers in other spaces, but there is room to increase class sizes.
And remember, we have 10% out of district enrollment. So so David has had to modify his policy to an annual review if you're eligible to come versus where you change your buildings. And then you can get really creative, just like they were doing at Salida Middle with taking the home ec class and making it into workspaces. There's plenty of work to do.
How many actual students is that, 10%?
Call it 120.
So that's a lot of students.
Yep.
A lot of money.
It's a lot of money, but it's also, right, so I think we have some elasticity in our innovation. You saw how creative they were getting, and we have some elasticity in our enrollment. And, we're gonna build a cement module.
I just think the important thing was yurt.
That was a joke, there's a joke.
Well, and I think too, we're thinking very, very, very traditionally again. We're thinking super traditionally again. Like we're just thinking in enlarging these big buildings or bringing in modules. I think we really need to think differently, just more innovatively.
I have interesting ideas, Crest could become the 4th grade. If we are bursting at the seams at Longfellow. Longfellow entry, that whole area can be at least one classroom, right? My kids grew up in military schools where the population could change by 50%. Where you double your class, you double who's coming, or you cut in half who's coming. And they got creative, and the stage is a classroom until theater class.
Yeah, and so I would challenge you all to start thinking differently,
Modified
because it
year-round.
always comes back to that same conversation. So that would be
Yeah,
my
we can-
challenge to
We
everybody.
could have, you can add year-round education and people there's all kinds of things we can do to get to where we're past our Longfellow and high school bond.
Right, yeah, rentals or pocket schools.
Pocket schools.
You know, there's
Or
just-
yurts.
Or yurt, yeah, I mean, why not, right?
Just put them on the roof.
Put them on the roof. So anyway, that would
We
be
go
my
with that
2
stuff.
cents.
Let's take a vote before we start throwing out more ideas to get public science.
So weird, not done yet. All right, we ready for a vote?
Ready for a vote.
Dr. Breckenridge-Pettit.
Aye.
Mr. Hobbs.
Aye.
Mrs. Lundberg.
Aye.
Mrs. Pascal.
Aye.
Ms. Schiffman.
Aye.
And Mr. Smith.
Everybody's still good? We're still good.
Still good.
Here comes the good one. Looking for a motion to approve new district curriculum teacher on special assignment, TOSA position.
I would make the motion.
Jen? Yes.
Second?
I have a second. Thank you. David?
Tried to present this. I think this fits right where we're at. I just heard some more teacher feedback again, our staff who really believe this is where they want to see our attention, which I think includes our money. I don't think this precludes us from taking care of insurance or salaries, but I think very clearly we've got everything else stable, which I'm really excited about. And I think it really frees us up to work on academic strategic planning. But part of that is getting a guaranteed and viable curriculum, and we haven't succeeded in doing that. I think we need a different structure. This is from your faculty, and I think it's a widespread ask. I think it allows us also to address professional development, which is a real frustration point for staff, for faculty. So
Is it
I
a
don't have
one,
anybody who doesn't agree to it.
is it a 1-year assignment?
It would be 2 years. How I wrote up the piece again, it would be another opportunity for us to do leadership development. It's one of the hard parts in a town like Salida. If you're a teacher and you're in the second half of your career and you want something new, what do you do other than be a principal? This would give them the benefit of that would be if they did the 2-year assignment and let's say they wanted to interview for a leadership position, I'd make sure they got an interview. But I wouldn't be promising anybody there. And then at the end of 2 years, we would have a choice, right? That person may realize they hate working in district responsibilities, get me back to the kids, and we could do that. Maybe that we don't have the money to support it, so we go back to a classroom without us shipwrecking class. It may be that we realize the work's done and there's not work to continue, so we have a stopping point to reevaluate. Or we may find it's really effective and the same person we really want to keep there, just like we did with Jen Lang in a team position at the elementary school, and they could reapply and we could do another 2 years. So that's how I wrote it.
Is this person going to be across all grades or?
Across all grades, focused this year on breaking down our curriculum written down so we had a really codified and clear, because that's where our gap is. Right.
So it's looking at every grade, every subject.
Every grade, every subject. The faculty would really say you need 2 different ones. You need one for kind of the humanities and one for kind of the science and math, which makes sense. But I think I want to make sure this is successful and I can keep it accountability. And I think if we get too many people on special district assignments, it would be harder to really prove that the investment was yielding what the teachers need and want. I would like to do 1 year, call it a planning cycle, and then the next year we can come back and say, has this really worked? And evaluate that. Because this would go straight to where the principals have been asking for a decade. We need coaches, we need to work on pedagogy. This would allow us to bridge into that. So that's the concept.
Would this be appropriate as considering, I know it kind of all flows to the bottom the same way, but one-time funds versus recurring so that it's easier to budget in or out, or do you not think that makes a difference?
I mean, Aaron would answer that question, but I think when you look at the fund balance, I don't know that it would make a difference. We could earmark that money and pull it aside, but everyone from faculty through administration is asking for this change. This is a way to walk ourselves and really test that change.
I think to your question, Joe, and I'm just trying to think of how to best talk about it. You haven't seen the operational wish list yet that we're developing for next month. there's a lot of asks on it, but basically me and David's value set was pretty hard line that you have to make a really compelling argument why we need a position over why we need to take care of benefits, steps, and address teacher pay, basically, being our three priorities and our three interests, I would say. And there has to be a really compelling argument for that. And at the same time, the current governor's budget, which I know I'm always hesitant on, has a fairly substantial increase for our district. I think we'll get close to it. I don't know that it'll necessarily be where it's at now, but so as we were doing that, it was like, it needs to be a compelling argument. It probably needs to come through staff to where we can do all of those with recurring funds to some extent, or at least be really close. Because our budget this year is already at 103% now of our expenditures to revenues. I think we'll end closer to 100%. I've shared that with you many times. So I want to try to continue that method of, okay, say we get whatever the number is. Right now, I think it's 800,000 more is what he's projecting. I think it'll be a little lower than that, but let's say it's 800,000. Then, okay, stack all the things up. If we can still take care of those three things and we have X amount of money that we can do recurring funds with the position, then let's see if we can do that. And so I think you put it in the recurring funds because what you do at this point, if you can afford it, and then I think we can afford it at this point, and we'll see what the governor's budget do, and then it might become a one-time fund situation.
Yeah, I mean, if it's a long-term thing, which we don't know if it is yet, I would definitely want to build it into recurring versus one-time, because then we face this issue again. I'm trying to recall when we started the TOSAs, I believe we said one-time funds because let's see how it goes. And then it kind of just became, why are we doing this one time? And now we got to eat into this in our recurring and everything else. So I'm fine with recurring. I want to make sure we're same page.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting because I think I just think about it differently, right? Like I think we've been educated that this is one time, this is recurring. Right now, I think the plan is to have this position recur at least for a couple of years. So I think we should budget it as recurring funds. That does still mean our budget might go over at some point. We justify it by saying, well, this is a one-time fund or what. That's my best answer.
I need to let my peers know that I am voting no on this. I need you to know the level of intensity of my no. If it was more intense, I would caucus you individually and try to persuade you. At this point, I'm just explaining to you why I'm voting no. David and I have already arm wrestled this for about 45 minutes. Firstly, I am cautious about student growth. And so as a small district, we don't have the economies of scale to keep adding non-instructional staff. I want to be more cautious, and so I'm voting no. Secondly, I want to put those funds into teachers and special service providers. Among our peers, we look good when you look at classified staff. We underpay our special service providers and our teachers. And I'm going to harp on this for any type of funds. Number 7 on our strategic plan, I wanted it to be 85 to 90% to humans, 10% to our facilities. That happens here. You see that we have a 22% increase in the cost of our insurance premiums. We can give them a big raise, but then they're just going to have to pay for those premiums, or we give them no raise so that we can pay for those premiums. As much as education matters, I want to put that into base teacher pay. Number 3, David in his video to us asserted that we cannot do MTSS, Tier 2 academic support, without this. I contend that that's not true. It's happening at Longfellow, right? It's happening at Salida Middle School. In fact, at Longfellow, there are 75 kids in Tier 2 interventions for English Language Arts, and there's 50 in math. It's already happening there. So we can do this without curriculum, a curriculum TOSA, in my opinion. I like a different approach because I don't like a staff member that's district-wide that is not held accountable to any executive in one building. I'm not saying that this person would do that, but I'm more comfortable with somebody that's in that building being held accountable to that principal. Can't hide at Salida Middle School and not do your work at Salida High School. The way it is as a district-wide position, I'm very uncomfortable with that. It did not work very well with some other positions in the past. Fourthly, this is about accountability and keep trying new things without seeing if they work. What we saw very successfully tonight was that Michelle, the principal at Salida Middle, gave us an evaluation of that new principal that Spanish, not new principals, that's Spanish. And it's really being utilized both in the Spanish classroom and then it frees up, just like she predicted, those special electives. We do not have evaluation follow-up that started 3 years ago for 25% of Salida High School's teachers having non-instructional time. It's supposed to be half for planning and then half for MTSS. They're making improvements, but I don't have any oversight on this. I looked at the table of Tier 2 interventions, both social, emotional, and academic, and there were 20 students. 5 of them were academics. The other were social, emotional. So 25% of their day over the last 3 years, now we're at 3.5, part of that day is supposed to have Tier 2 interventions. You have that happening at Longfellow already, and they do not have that type of protection time. I'm not comfortable giving non-instructional positions when we haven't followed up with this. Like Aaron said, we have operational next month. In my time as a board member, we've added 1 teacher. We've added a communication director. We've added a nurse. We've added another academic counselor. We partner with Sol Vista for social emotional learning. We're asking for front desk people. We're asking for additional support that is not in the classroom. I'm not comfortable with this TOSA. It's already happening at the middle school. You saw how Michelle talked about reverse engineering and scheduling to make sure the content is being taught before the exam happens. You talked about Jesse saying we're already past the 80% point of scope and sequence at the high school, which is our most vulnerable school, to be honest with you. It's already happening at Horizons, and it's already happening at Crest. I want to put the money in our special service providers and our teachers. I don't want to hire more non-instructional staff. I want to be cautious, and so that's why.
And I think that brings up several good points that I hadn't thought of. One, why are we trying to improve this tonight versus waiting for the full operational wish list so we can see all the positions together? And then 2, we're already looking at like a whole org chart reworking where we're going to have the assistant superintendent focusing on teachers and programs. So is it possible that once we have that assistant superintendent fully in that role of just teachers and programs, that they could take on some of this role of helping teams evaluate curriculum without having an additional person? And I think kind of what I do feel like it's an issue. Like I know that I've just heard from my kids, like from teachers, teachers say things to kids that maybe they shouldn't. But I know at least one teacher at the high school mentioned something about, I'm a new teacher. I walked in and wasn't given curriculum. I planned out what I was going to do for the semester, and I've already gone through over half of my material, and it's February. So I do believe that we have a lack and a need for curriculum development, but potentially with all these grade level teams and vertical teams and meetings, potentially there is an opportunity for the teachers to work within their teams to look at their own curriculums and let this assistant superintendent come in. So I don't know, that's just some thoughts to throw out. But I think at this point, I would rather at least bump the TOSA position to see what the rest of the operational wish list looks like.
So Mandy, it's important to remember that we spend $90,000 a year purchasing curriculums. And we have it effectively on a schedule so that they're continually updated.
Right.
So we have those curriculums.
So would that
There-
just have
It's
been like,
it's an access or administrative issue.
so just a teacher coming in, potentially that's more a lack of PD or mentoring or availability than that the curriculum isn't there?
I don't know, but do we not spend that? I mean, that would more than pay for a TOSA, right? That would pay for it, in theory, depends on their experience and everything like that. But we buy curriculum every year. Recall last year we bought science curriculum for the middle school.
Right.
It's there.
Right.
And it's everything. It's exams, it's quizzes, it's internet access, it's labs, it's all there.
And we just recently evaluated math curriculum too, right?
Every year we do.
Didn't the math team?
Well, and they're doing some PD. Yes, every year there's a schedule. It's beautifully laid out and it's purchased.
So maybe it would be worth trying to evaluate what are our gaps and why we have those gaps before jumping to hiring this position.
Good. Let me jump in and try and answer a couple questions there. One, why?
Yeah.
Because I've got 100% of the administration and the faculty saying this is what we would like for our support. So there's clarity there, which is a month or two earlier than I'm used to having. Two, the principals are always pushing on me of, can we post this earlier so they can get into the hiring game as early as possible, particularly if you do something like this, it'd be an internal position, so that it opens up another secondary. That's the reason for the ask early. So if you wanted to see it all and you're like, it's too fast, appreciate what that is, then you could table that piece and come back next month. The recommendation wouldn't change. So there's an answer to that space. Around the curriculum and stuff like that, I think what we haven't, we're coming out of stabilizing everything from the pandemic, and it's time to pick those things back up and hold people accountable to implementing those things that are in place. With that schedule, I've kind of, for this very reason, said we're not approving anything unless we have to. For instance, the literacy program we had is no longer being supported. So you've got ELA or literacy 3rd through 5th selecting a new one because we don't have a choice. They have to have something.
Because the internet support is in there.
Right.
Bought it and then
Yep, the company just withdrew it off the product line. So we've got to have that. The elementary school is much more, just because of the nature of the content, they're much more based in those curriculums. So they're much more implemented with fidelity than when you get to the secondary levels. And those things. So there's some comments to help you speak to some of the things you were asking about.
Can you adjust the financial piece? I mean,
Sure.
You know, it's a teacher. You already got a teacher's salary, and assuming they're getting some X on top of their salary for kicking into this position,
It'd just be a regular teacher salary schedule. Just be a different assignment.
and then we would have to hire another teacher to replace it.
And so it is a new, called $65,000
Okay.
that you're taking out of new money for a teacher. So,
Yeah,
and that's about what we budget, and that'd be probably what it is. You're gonna get a more experienced teacher, so.
Yeah, I mean, I was in the room when Jody and David arm wrestled for 45 minutes, so I'm a little bit aware of the conversation, and I value Jody's comments, especially about prep planning periods and the desire to have that 25% of the day for that and various things like that. There's a lot of this need at the high school level because the just number of staff that are kind of alternative licensure. Is it kind of the combination of coming out of the pandemic and having some accountability to what we're doing, seeing your workload and Will's workload. I appreciate the thought process of bringing in a new assistant superintendent, academic type person, but I just don't see the capacity to just say we can do all the things we need to do on the high level without all the middleman getting things done on the floor. So I have multiple questions.
I was gonna say, what was the question?
Alternative
specifically?
licensure?
I think there's multiple things. I'm not saying this is a high school issue. I know that some people might have that opinion. This is from K through 12, the ask from faculty of we need to focus on developing our curriculum pedagogy, instruction. That's where they would like us to be investing and listening to them and their perspective.
When you say them, David, the admin
Admin and
piece
faculty.
and faculty,
Yes.
because that was my first, along with you, Jody, my first thought was no more people on the top, right? Like I want to support more
We're asking for two.
for two.
And
And I would rather see it someone with contact with the students and higher pay for those teachers. And so same, I'm kind of on that same page as Jody, but I would like to have more time to think about it, ask more questions, and table it until we see the operational budget also.
Yeah, so you saying they're all 100% supportive, like that does carry weight for me because I feel like if the admin team is 100% unanimously asking for this, sitting up here in our chair making decisions when we're not in the classroom, I feel like that feels a little like a slap in the face if we listen to you. I don't remember where I was going.
What if over the next, I take the next month, you guys would like a little more time to think about it?
Oh, I remember.
Okay.
So with them saying they're 100% supportive, does that mean that all of them would be willing to like not have an additional ask for an additional hire in their building, and they would prefer this position over and potentially lose something in their own building?
Right, would you sacrifice Jesse, would you sacrifice the request of an electives teacher for this?
Yeah.
And the
Michelle,
answer is
will you
yes.
take?
And they all said yes to that too.
And Michelle, you would get rid of that Spanish teacher, right?
Well, I don't think we're getting rid of
Over
stuff.
time,
We're
over
just
time.
be adding, right?
I asked the exact question.
We're not gonna add another Spanish teacher to the middle school. We're gonna.
Right, that's the
exact question was placed, and the answer is yes. If you guys aren't comfortable and you want to see it in the bigger picture and you need some time to think about it, I can also make sure that I can put in the next board packet. Here's some really clear faculty input in that space.
I think that would be helpful, and to get sort of a little day-to-day overview, maybe slight, like what it really looks like in the buildings.
And I guess in terms of hiring too, like I understand that request to want to get out early with hiring. When does the hiring really become a big push where all the districts are boosting their positions and really going for it? Like
after spring break.
So we're still ahead of the curve if we look at the operational list in March.
There's a secondary impact. You're going to take somebody from a classroom, basically, promote them. That's going to create a new hole. So that's out of space, but this won't be the first time we figure out how to handle it. If you guys aren't comfortable, then
Yeah, and I would say
push it.
we're going to look at the operational list. We probably won't necessarily approve it.
We'll have a good feel for what's.
You'll have a good thing. We're pretty settled on the operational wish list. Because insurance will be the next thing that we're hoping to put in the mix, a little more concrete and a little less theory. So that'll be next month.
Yeah, I'm appreciative of what Jody and Karen said about more dollars to people in the classroom and everything like that. But I do feel pretty strongly that we do need some more administrative type level people, and that brings additional support to those staff members, and not just necessarily dollar amount type thing, but kind of day-to-day type support versus just, extra money on the paycheck. So I understand there's balance there and everything else, but I'm fine tabling it. Sounds like that's the direction we're going. I don't think there's anything based on our financial stability and everything else that is going to cause me concern. I'm not going to go nilly spending, but just we're in a financially healthy position to put some sort of opportunity like this in front of the board to support. And as we saw during the pandemic, the TOSAs were the first things to kind of say back to the classroom because we have a funding issue. So that's why I really appreciate the kind of concept behind it all is you try to promote kind of growth and leadership and develop your existing staff, and then if you have some funding issues, there's the first place that you can save a little bit and put those people back in the classroom and still be kind of effective with kids.
Can I get a clear picture?
Yep.
So after the 2 years, this person's been working in curriculum. What would we expect to see? Like a scope and sequence of all curriculum
I
over
expect
all?
to see a K-12 scope and sequence 100% done by the end of next school year.
Okay, for all
All the above.
Scope and sequence.
So
Okay.
that I would then know 70% of this is beautiful and we get celebrated, and this 30% isn't beautiful, and dial in. I think we then would also be able to say, look at some of the request the principals keep bringing around needing coaching to grow our workforce. And I think we could then much clearer see it from where we are today, and we can see how it could be effective and be more concrete in that.
And does it leave room for teachers to create their own curriculum
Yes and no.
or alter it to their
And I
own
think that's a
teaching
big problem
styles?
we have that we need to talk about in Salida, Colorado, is it is not a DIY job. The Board of Education by law dictates what the curriculum is. It doesn't mean the majority of my grade teachers don't take it from here and extend it. Here's the minimum. It's not a make it up because you're more of, you like, everyday math and you don't like the other, you have to stay within that decision that's made.
But it's not a scripted curriculum you're looking for everybody to do at the same.
It's not my goal. Right?
I mean, I guess you wouldn't know that until you saw the curriculum, but
But that's why every district that is struggling to find growth scores and everything else has to move more and more towards that side of the continuum. And the more and more you have growth, the more you can have freedoms there. So it's a balance point.
I mean, but it also, I guess I kind of see it as you have a standard curriculum. Because a kid who takes English 1 should be getting the same material depending on which teacher they have. It is the teacher's uniqueness and flexibility more in how they choose to teach the material versus in what the material actually is.
They extend it, the extra little things. I guess that is what a guaranteed
But I do feel
viable
like right
curriculum is.
now we do have a situation where a kid might take a class with one teacher and then another kid takes the same class with a different teacher and they've had a very different experience and received very different content is what I've noticed.
so this teacher would not necessarily be assessing the how the teacher teaches a curriculum.
Not at this
They're
point.
just outlining the curriculum.
Let's get it written down and published so we can all see it.
So
it's-
again, no contact with students.
No, it is supporting teachers.
Additionally, I'll send this link to you, but our state gives you the objectives for every subject in every grade. And then you line your curriculum up that we purchase to outline those and meet those. So we have this data already available to us. Do we need additional information?
Yes.
That teacher that comes in that
Yeah.
says nothing was handed to me, this is there and it's a state requirement. Of course, he or she has the pedagogy, right, and how you assess. You have to come up with yourself if you don't use the curriculum that was purchased in the last 5 years, right? So there's so many resources available.
So I guess for me is like, where's the disconnect, right? Between what you're saying and what's available to them and what they're saying they don't have or can't get. Where do you think it is?
I'm a little with Joe in that there's alternative licensure and it's tricky and our principals are very busy if somebody comes in and is stuff in your room. How do you organize that, right? Just like most other jobs, right? And how do you make it effective?
Yeah.
I am concerned about alternative licensures. That happens more at the high school. There's one at the middle school. And it is more difficult as you age. But those two English teachers at the high school should be looking at that, should be talking to each other, and should have similar content, and then you get creative with your andragogy, your assessments, your classroom discipline.
Yeah.
I don't hear that you guys are ready to take a vote. You should need some more information, so I might recommend that you table it.
Looking to Jen to make a motion.
Yes. So
So table
again, table.
Yes. And to vote on the table, Dr. Breckenridge Pettit, Mr. Hobbs,
Aye.
Mrs. Lundberg,
Aye.
Mrs. Pascal,
Aye.
Ms. Schiffman,
Aye.
and Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Gee,
Okay, looking for a motion to change SHS Dean Tosa to assistant principal position and salary schedule.
so moved.
So moved.
Be my second, Jody.
Seconded.
That is as our first. Okay. Discussion then.
Discussion time, David, you want to add anything to this?
I feel like I presented this one. This one feels pretty straightforward and easy, and there's no one who has a different opinion. So it's pretty easy to recommend.
Do we feel like this will help with the authority component as well, of just the title? As much as I hate titles, but the title will help in any type of authoritative
It matters for
documents.
title, but it also matters for job description. Basically, what you're adding is teacher evaluation, as well as those things, and you're developing on your staff members and keeping them around.
There's already a few extra days on their contract.
It's actually going to be the same amount of days. We're just adding more job duties and increasing responsibility and freeing them up. It's pretty standard in a high school our size to have that position. All the other principals feel really comfortable with that change there, even though it's different than what they have.
And it increases salary.
It is a small increase in salary. Yep. Doesn't mean that person won't still do extra duties, being a coach or something else, right? Just like anybody else might have access to some of those stipends, extra duty things that we have out there.
All right, Dr. Breckenridge Pettit,
Aye.
Mr. Hobbs,
Aye.
Mrs. Lundberg,
Aye.
Mrs. Pascal,
Aye.
Ms. Strickman,
Aye.
and Mr. Schmidt.
Okay, looking for a motion to approve 0.5 FTE math teacher for Horizons Exploratory Academy.
I'll move
Second.
Jen?
It's on here. It came in later because it was just a different thing, and all the admin supported this. And talking to service, she made a really strong argument. The easiest part was it's going to move me closer to kids. She's at a 0.5 FTE math posted all year long and has 0 applicants. So we cannot find that half a person. So this would put the money there, and then she believes we need to figure out how to do the management of this Oak Street property without adding anybody there, any assistants or anything else. So this would be, rather than having that, she would rather have a teacher that goes right to kids. She'll figure out how to handle more of the administrative side of things on her own. So she would rather see the money spent there. So I can't argue it, and there's no applicants for what we already have.
Just to be clear,
Mhm.
there is already a half-time that's unfilled.
Yep.
This would add another half.
Yep.
So that there's a 1.0.
Yes.
That's what I thought, but just.
And the reason I put it on there is once I got clarity from all of admin supporting it, the sooner I can post this. So I put it on there, but I put it on action. Normally I put this under consent, but I put this under action because it came in.
David, is this the one where it was advertised as half at the high school and half at,
They posted it like 3 different ways over the last year.
and then at the high school they got the half?
At the high school, they were able to get a full person because somebody was on maternity leave and then decided not to come back from maternity leave, thereby shuffling all the pieces.
So would this person work at Horizons full-time math?
And this, the pending move is probably where service feels like allocating these resources to staff versus some of the admin Oak Street stuff, since you dedicated here full-time, that's.
And the two, she's got to do, like right now, she runs her own advisory. We would put those kids with the staff member dedicated to that, which frees her up to do more administrative. Concerns we have here is you're gonna have 3 different clienteles, 3 different doors. How does that exactly work? It's gonna be interesting, but she'd rather solve that and put her money towards that program for kids. I can't argue with it.
So on the organizational chart where it says Oak Operations Receptionist Secretary, is that probably not going to be an ask anymore?
It's probably not gonna be an ask to change this week. I really thought I was trying to get us an assistant for her, but she really not interested in extending that. So,
Interestingly, they got really creative. They're trying the CMC math for humanities or business math or something like that. And it's not
Yeah, I mean, I was just talking to her on the break, and she said one of the biggest things is their kids don't do homework at Horizons. That's why they're at Horizons, is for an alternative method that doesn't involve homework. And the CMC instructor gave them lots of math homework, and they really, really struggled and couldn't do it. And yeah, and then I think the advisory piece is huge. Like having her advise 8 students, and then half the time she's not available to them, feels really unfair for those kids and for her, because then she feels like she's not able to do a good job.
Mandy, what position were you looking at for Horizons?
On the organizational chart, like at the very bottom right box, it says Oak Operations.
That's what I sent
Oh.
over the board package.
It's in the
Oh.
board packet.
Okay.
But it says receptionist secretary, like to be added to Oak
Okay.
as a new position.
And then
So
take that
this would
off.
speak more to what you guys were saying, like
Right.
giving money to the kids versus the receptionist.
Appreciate that sacrifice. And she wants both. Deserves them both.
Well, and I think certainly after her having a year in this building, to see how, I mean, I hope it's a lot easier for her to manage both schools being in the same building, so she might be totally fine. Or next year she might say, I really need a reception.
There's a few other things we can talk about next month. I'm trying to move little pieces around to try and increase efficiencies around some of those jobs, but it's not a conversation for them.
Ready for a vote?
All right, Dr. Breckenridge Pettit,
Aye.
Mr. Hawks,
Aye.
Mrs. Lundberg,
Aye.
Mrs. Pascal, Ms. Schiffman, and Mr. Smith.
Somebody should have voted no somewhere, and that's just that.
Well, we tabled
ready.
everything's ready to
Table some more things. Jeez, guys.
Oh, I don't think so.
All right, we still have a few things ahead of us, so hopefully we can get quickly through board communications. Maybe BOCES.
I don't think there's any updates.
Thank you for sending out the newsletter.
That is an impressive newsletter. huh?
It was too impressive that it didn't load for me, so I haven't.
It's so, like,
It's thorough.
so comprehensive.
Facilities committee, there's not much there other than still waiting on the county. Still working with housing trust on the quadplex. Have we heard anything about the 9th Street appraisal, old HE appraisal? All right. I heard that was ordered, but I've not heard anything else.
I brought it back up to Ben Cairns this week to say, can we get that moving? So he was gonna try and work with Glenwood to see what the problem was.
Nice to communicate these things. Communications, Jen, Matt, Kim?
We have a meeting tomorrow to kind of go through our future communication plan, so that's exciting. Myself and David.
So Matt in general, yeah.
Not we, so you're okay, yeah, Jen, it's not you, no, we're. We have a consultant who's helping us with a
Real
communication plan, so.
communications.
We just need to get rid of that committee, like,
Yeah.
we'll just
I
get
mean,
through this
does it
year. We'll get
still
through the
need to
year.
be a committee?
Let's get through this year, and I think we can.
Just defer to Kim, everybody.
Is this with, Bill? Okay.
I
So
have
hopefully
seen
gain some
that
more clarity.
all around town, photos.
We're working hard. I got a 25-page draft document today. I went over it in 2 hours. So we're trying to move past the theoretical and start to produce. We'll start producing.
Cassie, Bill?
I'm just reading the things. They're all, just wondering what's going to happen. I feel like David's obviously the point person on all this stuff and is in the loop. So just prognosticating what the state has.
Then CASB would be policies. There's 2 things there. One, they're trying to figure out a new kind of board docs program. So we want to kind of see what that is. Put that in your board packet or one of my updates. So we're kind of set, but I think that'll probably be a June kind of decision. We're going to let some things settle out there. Plus, Kim's been talking to other board secretaries, and it's a mixed bag review of how effective it really is. And then the only other thing I'm just today they came out with a big policy update around title, and that one is I'm going to let that sit. We are not going to be on the front
You don't
end
need to
trying
do
to
that one.
chase that, right?
Title
Title 9, yep. And the change between the administrations, they're just changing everything. I think it's the official diagnostic of that one.
If you don't get the stuff from Casby, I can forward it around if you want to read it. It's not.
But I am
very
gonna let that
helpful.
sit and let
Yeah.
other big districts who have legal teams fully on to chase that one down. I don't think we're the ones to be on point. I think the key thing for us is just to continue to make sure that all of our kids feel welcome. That's where our focus needs to be.
Okay. Dr. Hill, great DAC update. Policy audit?
Policy audit, we're prepped, but I didn't get to this month, so I think we'll be ready for March, April.
Okay, beautiful. Next meeting, March something. Who wants to sign up for agenda review?
I can, I think, in March.
Beginning of March-ish.
Karen? We talk about additional meetings, retreats, so on and so forth. I don't think we need them. Do we?
Nope, I don't see a need for a retreat.
Hammering things out. Retreat. Okay, beautiful. We will start working our way towards the executive session. I don't have the script like I usually do.
You just need a motion, go to your very back page.
Where is it?
Flip one more page back, a motion. Go back.
Okay. We will need a motion to go into executive session to discuss Superintendent Dr. Blackburn's evaluation and contract as authorized by CRS. To determine positions and negotiation and to instruct negotiators. And 4.2F personnel matters. And that Superintendent Blackburn will be invited to join the board for a portion of the executive session.
Second,
Second?
any discussion? Vote, Dr. Breckenridge Pettit. Mr. Hobbs. Mrs. Blumberg. Mrs. Pascal. Ms. Schiffman. Aye. And Mr. Smith. Get out of here if you can just.
Work our way through.
And I go take it back.
Yeah.
Let's turn off mics.
All right, let's wrap.